I'm asking you, how did you?
Sorry, are we just trying to do a bait and switch? So Taco tries to run away from justifying his, gish gallop, and instead of his response is get out, get out, get out.
No, we're not doing this. You're not going to make shit up. So there's no gish gallop. There's no nonsense going on here. I am not on your end there is, but I am not dealing with your science denial nonsense. You asked me how I came to this conclusion. I told you is backed up by immense empirical evidence, mathematical evidence. It's backed up by philosophy. It's even got all sorts of philosophies built around it. You have no idea what you're talking about, ADJ. And in fact, all of science ultimately breaks down to this one thing, right? You're just making shit up. No one cares.
Wait, what was the question?
He's asking me to justify. He said that quantum field theory isn't empirical evidence.
I wanted to know from him how he justifies that.
Wait, no, Eddie J, what was the question? Is he speaking? I can't hear him.
He's unmuted now, but he's not speaking.
He wanted to know how quantum physics is necessary in all possible worlds.
ADJ, are you there? Is he speaking? I still can't hear him.
He probably ran away because he got muted for making shit up.
Oh, okay. We can come back later.
ADJ, you can talk. You're unmuted.
Yeah, there's no.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, what was your question?
We can hear you now.
Sorry, my Discord interface is messed up. So when you're talking about empirical evidence, Taco, what's an example
ADJ,
of that?
ADJ, stop talking to Taco. What was your original question?
What I'm asking, I'm asking a follow-up question to him. So when you're talking about empirical evidence, what empirical evidence would you use as an example to justify that?
Wait, no, justify what?
When he's talking about we have empirical evidence to justify this, what form of empirical evidence do you have to justify
what?
Justify that his quantum theory, quantum field theory is the necessary condition for existence.
So
philosophical position.
Wait. So there isn't any empirical evidence for necessary beings. Necessary beings are philosophical concepts. There is zero.
He just said that there was.
No, he
so
was talking
Taco
specifically about quantum field theory and quantum fields.
Sorry, is Taco allowed to speak for himself?
So there is empirical evidence of quantum fields, like the Casimir effect. Quantum field theory has empirical evidence. There's no empirical evidence for the necessary being part. Is that specifically the part you were asking about?
All right, so Taco was wrong on that.
No.
I think it's a philosophical position.
Hold up.
I'll just ask my question again.
ADJ,
what empirical evidence
stop
do you
talking.
have
Stop talking. So Taco misunderstood you. He was specifically talking about empirical evidence for quantum fields. That has an abundance of empirical evidence. Well, your question was specifically about the necessary being part. Is that correct? I think he missed that part.
Yeah, I've heard Taco numerously say that that a quantum field is the necessary conditions for all existence.
And you're asking for what is the justification that it's the necessary being?
I'm not really like TJ. I don't know who you are. I'm just interested in talking to Taco. If Taco can't speak for himself and he needs an adult to speak for him, I guess I'll have to talk to you.
So was I correct? Your question is specifically referring to the necessary being part, and that's the part you're asking about.
Well, necessary being. He's saying that. I'd like for him to clarify what he means by that.
I'm asking.
But from what I'm gathering, is that that's what he's trying to establish.
Stop. So you were specifically asking just about the necessary being part. That was your question, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Taco.
Just so you know, you're talking to an entire panel here.
Directly, right?
And you're talking to an entire panel here. It's not that somebody's covering for somebody else. It's you're talking to a whole panel.
It seems like people are covering for other people. Like Taco's pretty quiet. I asked him a specific question, and it seems like he's saying something. I'm just saying, you're saying something, but you haven't been able to prove it. You shouldn't have said it was empirical. Oh, I think that's about it, Taco. I think it's easy to say that you're a hack.
Well, can I actually? Okay.
No, he wants
to
go ahead,
Amy. Go ahead, Amy. Let's hear your observation.
Well, the whole point is that presuppositionalism is kind of ridiculous. And so Taco has actually taken their arguments, which are ridiculous, and have said what would be an actual foundation if there was a necessary being. Necessary beings, as T-Jump said, they physicists don't use that type of language. But the point that Taco is making
Actually,
is
that's
that,
not true. There's a few physicists who do claim that if there is a necessary being, that it would be
well,
quantum field, a quantum
that is
field, or
that's what your point is. That's what my
quantum vacuum, or something of that nature. Whatever that fundamental form of the energy is, right?
and that is what my point is that what you're saying is that if there was an actual necessary being, where would we find it? In some sort of physical phenomenon. We would find it in something like a quantum field theory. And so both presuppositionalism is ridiculous and apologists don't have anything.
Actually, I think most non-physicists also don't use the term necessary being.
I wouldn't say most physicists use it, but I have heard several mainstream leading physicists use it.
Like
It
who?
looks like some hobo's ready to try again here. Welcome back, some hobo. How are you? What's
Hey.
on your mind?
Well, can you hear me good this time?
We can hear you loud and clear, sir.
Perfect. What's been on my mind is I went to a deliverance retreat recently, and which is just a place where they cast demons out. And while I was there, I met people who could actually see demons, and I questioned them about it, what it was like for them, and it seemed pretty consistent. Like people would see things, like things get thrown around the room. One guy, a bed was moving around. Just to clarify, I haven't experienced any of this.
You know, there's quite often a lot of illusions and things done. There's a lot of scammers run these kinds of things, and they make it appear that people are defying gravity and the laws of physics in general and things like that. But there's a lot of trickery that can be done. Are you familiar with James Randi, Randi?
I'm not.
Okay, I would suggest look him up and take a look at the various documentaries he's done. He's actually a professional musician who later on began assisting scientists because people were using magic to try to play tricks on the scientists to prove that they could do supernatural things. So what he did is he's been educating people on how those tricks work, what people are doing to make it seem that they have magical powers that they don't have. He's been making major contributions to skepticism and the fields of skepticism in science for many, many years, and really helped out a lot because once you explain to the scientists, here's the problem, here's what these people are doing, then they would set up the environment differently so that they wouldn't be able to use those tricks to prove to make it appear that they had these kind of special powers. So I think you may find that very interesting. It may be particularly helpful if you look up exorcisms and see what he has to say on that, because I think he gets right into all of that.
What was his name again?
James Randi, James Randi.
Is he kind of an older guy? Because I might have seen him.
Oh yeah, he's
dead.
yeah, but he's the contributions he's made are still valid. They're excellent. Do take a look at it, because once you see all of this and take a look at how magic is done in general, it will be you'll see right through the nonsense whenever you're at these kinds of events later, and then you won't be fooled.
Yeah, I used to be a magician. Like for about 2 years, I'd go out to bars and do magic and stuff. And I used to be an extreme skeptic. And at this event, they never like did any magic or anything. There's nothing like where they made it look like demons were there or anything. Maybe the stories people told, it all happened at their house.
Oh, I thought you mentioned. I'm sorry if I misunderstood. I thought earlier you were saying there were people like floating around and stuff like that. Maybe I misunderstood you.
They were talking about times they saw stuff floating around.
Yeah, it's still worthwhile looking into James Randi, especially if you have background in magic. You'll probably have a particular appreciation for what he's been doing. But I think people telling their anecdotes, you have to be really careful about that kind of thing, because people can tell you what they want to see, what they think they saw, which can correlate with what they wanted to see at the time or experience, and it may not actually be accurate. And that's where, you know, the actual tests with statistically significant numbers of subjects and whatnot is very important, because if you have 10,000 people who are, or even 1,000 people who are experiencing the same thing versus just one, then okay, and you're saying 950 out of those 1,000 people are giving a consistent response. Okay, that's something to look into. But just one person or 5 people or 12 people saying this is really not enough.
Yeah.
Everything that they said could be fully explained by natural phenomenon. And when tested under scientific conditions, every single one of the claims about the supernatural has been proven false. So when they're in their own home and there's no controls, they see things they can't explain. And so their brain makes up an explanation that fits their worldview. When tested by science, their explanation fails. When in a convention where there's lots of people who have similar kinds of beliefs, they can all construct the same stories, which makes them consistent. But when tested by science, they all fail. There's never been a case where any evidence of demons has ever been shown to exist outside of the imagination of the people who believe in them.
And to go even further down the rabbit hole, the field of psychology can get into how this stuff spreads from person to person, how people are amenable to believing things that aren't true and whatnot.
But I'm now completely curious. What kind of demons do you think exist?
I see demons as a pretty broad subject, because in the ancient Greek, it just meant spirits, and then as Christianity spread, demons became a negative view. So I believe in spirits in general, and I'm open to a bunch of different cultures' views on spirits.
See, but that almost sounds like you're shopping for demons. Like, do you actually believe that there is? Because I feel like both T Jump and Randolph gave us good reasons why we shouldn't believe in demons. I will give another reason, and that is because we should not give credit to evil spirits for doing bad deeds. And I'll tell you why. Because that lets humans off the hook. When it really was them, it's not that a bad spirit made someone do something wrong. It's that unfortunately they made a decision, and that decision hurt someone. And so they should take credit, not some third party that is trying to manipulate them. That would be my pushback, and I still would like to know if there's a actual demon.
What do you mean? Is there an actual demon? They're like, um, yeah. What do you mean? If there's an actual demon?
Well, I guess that would be. I guess I should have just ended with that. I think it's a bad concept. I think not only is it empirically unsound, but I think it lets people emotionally off the hook. So if you don't have like an actual like, listen, there was this demon that came to me and told me to do blah blah blah. Because that's what I imagine. At least that's what they do in many of the holy texts. But all of a sudden, now demons get very vague.
Yeah, it is pretty vague, at least for me when I talk about it. So I guess I'll say this: after this experience, I do believe human nature. We do, like, we're still responsible for how we act. Um, I guess how I see demons is there's Satan, who's the one who's the leader of all demons, and in our thoughts, sometimes a demon does speak, and I think that sometimes the Holy Spirit does speak too. Even though, granted, most of the time it's our own inner dialogue. So I think that's how we get tempted by demons.
So it is Satan.
Well, what do you mean? Like, Satan's the one who's in charge of them all.
And I
But
guess
though,
my question would just be, what evidence do you have that a Satan exists?
yeah, this isn't necessarily evidence based. I'm just searching. still, from what people see in things.
James Randi will serve as a really great spirit animal for you.
All right. Well, thank you.
Seriously, do look into his stuff. I think, given that you've done some magic in the past, you'll probably have a particular appreciation for him, because he does talk about magic quite a bit in his earlier works.
James Randi.
Yes, James Randi, Randi.
All right.
Nice talking with you.
Yeah, thanks for joining
Likewise.
us. Yeah.
Thanks for coming up. Joshua's next in queue. I'm pulling him up right now.
Joshua, welcome. Thank you for joining us. What's on your mind?
I want to challenge Taco's claim.
My.
Okay.
Hey, Taco,
What's the claim, and what is your challenge?
that the universal quantum field is necessary being good.
We can't even understand you.
I think he said that the universe is a necessary being. Did I hear you right,
No,
Joshua?
I said, Taco, wasn't your claim that the universal quantum field is the necessary being?
Fundamental substrate would be the necessary being.
You said what?
Whatever that fundamental substrate is, which I call, and actually T-Jump calls the universal quantum field. I kind of stole it from him, but on that name specifically. But same. I mean, it's the same thing, right? I mean, it's just whatever that fundamental substrate is, that quantum field or quantum void, whatever that ultimately breaks down to, that fundamental form of the energy.
Okay, and what entails its necessity?
It has to exist in all possible worlds. You can't imagine anything that exists or could exist that doesn't consist of energy, right? There's no possible thing that exists without consisting of energy.
I agree with that part. So would you say,
Then
because
you agree with my position and T-Jump's position,
Hang on.
and several
physicists. Earlier you made the claim that it's responsible for the current state of the universe we live in, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, is that what entails its
everything would
necessity?
derive from it.
Okay, is the current state of the universe that we live in right now, does that exist in all possible worlds?
No, why would it? Why would it need
No.
to? How does that even relate to the position?
Such a dumb question.
No, it's just a question. If the necessity of the universal quantum field is based off of the current of the creation of the current state of the universe that we live in, if there's a possible world where the current state of the universe we live in doesn't exist, there goes its necessity.
No, it has nothing to do with the
Follow.
current state of the world. What gibberish is this? The quantum field can create lots of different kinds of worlds. So no, this could be the only one like ours. It has nothing to do with the necessary being a quantum field.
Sorry,
So
I said
the-
that was a dumb question. I get it. You just don't understand what you're talking about, and so that prompted
No,
you
then
to
your
ask these
claim-
questions. I get it. I'm sorry.
Hang on.
That was my bad there.
Okay, so your claim would be it's necessary regardless?
Yes, the necessary field is necessary in all possible worlds. This world is one possible world, so it's in this possible world, but it's also in all of the other possible worlds, which are all different.
And what would entail its necessity?
That it's in all possible worlds. That's what entails its
That's it?
necessity. Yes, that's
Is there any
literally
way
that's
contingent?
literally the definition of a necessary being. Like, just if you any
Is there
philosophical
any-
definition, it's literally just defined as a being that exists in all possible worlds. That's what it means to be necessary.
And it can't be contingent, right?
What no, just a necessary being is just a thing that exists in all possible worlds. That's all it means. That is the full extent of the definition. There's no not contingent in there. It's just a being that exists.
But
in
I'm
all
reading it
possible
right now
worlds.
and it says cannot fail to do so.
Yes, that's
Wouldn't
what it
that
means.
entail
Literally,
contingency?
exists in all possible worlds means it does not exist in one of those. So exist
Okay,
in all
so it
possible
can't be
worlds.
contingent.
No, I don't think you understand what you just read. So when it says cannot fail to do so, that means there can't be a possible world where this thing does not exist in it. That's all it means.
No, I agree with that. So it can't be contingent, right?
No, contingent is there's no contingent anywhere in that. Nothing in that says anything about
So
contingent.
it could be
all it
susceptible to
says
failure.
is Yeah, it could be a potato. A potato that exists in all possible worlds would be a necessary being.
No, I'm talking about specifically universal quantum field. Is it any way susceptible to failure?
That doesn't even make sense. That is an incoherent sentence. It exists in all possible
What?
worlds, and there's no possible world where it does not exist.
Okay, so it's not susceptible to failure.
That doesn't make sense. Failure is like when a bridge collapses because there's too much force on it. Failure is like when you're
And
testing something and it doesn't work. Like, that is not a coherent sentence.
it's a pretty simple question.
No, it's
Listen, he
not.
And it otherwise
needs
have not been.
God for a math exam, so he really needs you to answer this. Can't fail.
Can't fail. There cannot be a possible
Okay.
world that the quantum field does not exist. I think that's what you
yeah,
mean when you
beautiful.
say fail. Not what the word fail means,
Yeah.
but I think that's what you mean.
Yeah, sure. All right. So is there any empirical evidence that proves that it's the necessary being responsible for all things?
No, there is no empirical evidence of necessary beings existing for any context ever.
So how do you hold on to this claim?
The philosophical definition based on the necessary existence of energy has nothing to do with empirical evidence.
Wait, then how can you make the claim that it's responsible for the
There
universe?
are other kinds of evidence other than empirical evidence, like philosophical evidence. You can use philosophical evidence even if you don't have empirical evidence,
Okay, then what is to say that God isn't the necessary being?
because there's no evidence at all for God. No philosophical evidence, no empirical evidence, no any evidence.
And that's debatable.
Yes, that's why we're here. Do you have any evidence?
Would your position be into infinite regression of dependent things?
No. What does that have to do with the evidence? What is your evidence for God? Like we've just been saying there's a necessary being, so clearly there's not an infinite regression because it goes back to the necessary being, which is the quantum field. Do you have any evidence for God? Because we have lots of evidence for quantum fields existing.
Is the quantum field conscious?
No.
Okay, then how are we conscious if we lead back to it?
Do you have a
Wow.
stomach?
Yeah.
How do we have a stomach if stomachs aren't in the quantum field? Oh my God. It's like
Well, I'm asking you.
Exactly.
oh my God. So there's this thing called emergent properties. You have a stomach, you have a heart, you have eyes, you have poop. None of those things are in the necessary thing. You don't even believe God has like a stomach, right? How do we have a stomach if the necessary being doesn't have a stomach?
Kind of what I'm asking you, if anything.
Yes.
If there could be an infinite, if there could be a regression going back all the way to the necessary being, and you just said the necessary being isn't conscious, then how can we be conscious if it goes back to it?
Bro.
He jumped. Okay,
Does God have
Emergent
butt
properties.
hair?
If somebody just explains
What
to
does that
you
have to do with
how
my
this
question?
process works from the Big Bang to today and how the stomach developed, would you no longer believe in your God?
Why my stomach? I didn't ask about my stomach. I asked
Okay,
about
So,
consciousness.
well, I'm asking you, right?
It's an
So,
example.
I was trying to lead into this. So, does God have a stomach? Like the organ?
After the incarnation, yeah.
No. I mean, like the previous God, the necessary being God. Does the God before Jesus have a stomach?
Like the non-physical one?
No, like a physical one, like a physical organ that is a stomach.
No, I wouldn't think so.
No, but he created this other stuff called matter, and matter combined to produce emergent things like organs, right? So God, the necessary being, doesn't need to have all of the things we have, doesn't need to have those. So a quantum field can produce like matter and energy, and that matter and energy can combine to make other stuff like stomachs and consciousness. And those are emergent properties. They don't exist in the fundamental nature of reality. They're a product of combinations of other things like matter and energy. So just like you believe the God doesn't have a stomach because stomachs, physical stomachs, are not a part of the necessary nature of reality, the quantum field doesn't need to have consciousness because consciousness is like a stomach. It's an emergent property. It's not fundamental. It is a product of other things.
Okay, so why does that completely cut out the God theory?
Because God's conscious, and consciousness is like a stomach. It's an emergent thing. It is a product of combinations of other smaller things. So if God has a consciousness, God is contingent.
Wait, how does that make God contingent?
Because consciousness is by definition contingent. Consciousness is a combination of other
What about
smaller things.
omniscience?
What? Omniscience is not a thing. Literally impossible.
Okay, but for God, I'm saying.
No, it's
omniscience-
literally impossible for God. Like there's a proof of this. It's called Gödel's
Okay,
incompleteness theorem.
theoretically speaking, what omniscience be contingent?
Omniscience would be contingent on consciousness.
Also true. That's a good one, Randolph. That's good. That's a good.
How?
How can you know things if you have no consciousness?
All right, but no one's saying that God could ever be unconscious.
No. So can you be unconscious, have no consciousness, and also be omniscient?
No.
So omniscience is contingent on consciousness.
Indeed.
Mhm. Yeah, but with my God claim, that wouldn't be.
Oh, you just said it would be. What do you mean it wouldn't be? So can God be
No,
omniscient?
if
and
we
not-
have a being. No, I wasn't talking about God in that specific example that you just gave.
What?
Let me clarify. With my God claim, God can't ever be not conscious.
Right. So can
He
a
can never
thing
sleep.
be omniscient and not be conscious?
When you're asking me that, are you asking me about God?
Yes, I'm asking about anything ever. Can God have all knowledge and not be conscious?
He can't be not conscious.
Right. So there's no way for him to have omniscience and not be conscious.
You're confusing with what I'm saying. I'm saying he can't ever lose
Can the
his consciousness.
quantum field be omniscient and have all knowledge even though it has no consciousness?
No.
It's because omniscience is contingent on consciousness.
Yeah.
So omniscience is contingent. God is contingent.
I just said that he can't lose his consciousness. He can't just like get out.
Right. We don't care about that part. We were caring about is omniscience a necessary property or is it a contingent property? If it's a necessary property, that means it isn't contingent on anything. If it's a contingent property, that means it's not a part of the necessary being. Omniscience is contingent on consciousness, therefore omniscience can't be a part of the necessary being because it's contingent.
From
Also,
a
just to take it back to something that T-Jump and Taco have been saying, this is why quantum field fluctuations and quantum field theory would apply, because it is not contingent, unlike everything that a god seems to be.
is there empirical evidence that completely cuts out the God theory?
I mean, each god is a very unique and specific thing.
What
Some
evidence
gods-
would convince you that no gods exist? What do you want to see? What do you want to hear?
I'm just asking if there's any form of like evidence in which it proves without a reasonable doubt that
Yeah,
God
I
is.
think there's a
a
bunch, right?
delusion.
But just look at the trees, right? But
Yeah,
what
show me
evidence
some.
would convince you that no gods exist, right? That's why I'm asking you, because I look at the trees and I know no gods exist, right? So I could say that to you, but you seem to be corrupted by religion, and so you wouldn't think the same, right? And so I'm asking you, what scientific evidence would convince you that no gods exist?
Well, I mean, evidence doesn't work that way. Evidence doesn't disprove things. Evidence provides evidence for things. So you're not going to find empirical evidence that geocentrism is wrong. You're going to find empirical evidence that heliocentrism is right. So there's no such thing as evidence that disproves anything. There's evidence for things, not against things.
You could draw conclusions from large data sets, though.
We could all be in the matrix, so it can't disprove anything. So you can't like have evidence against geocentrism because we could be in the matrix or whatever. It's just the evidence we have indicates heliocentrism is true. And so there's never any evidence that disproves a hypothesis. It just doesn't work that way. You have evidence for a hypothesis. There's lots of evidence for quantum fields. There's lots of evidence for the fundamental nature of reality not being conscious, because consciousness is an emergent property. There's lots of evidence that it's not omniscient because omniscience is contingent. But there's no evidence that
Is there
disproves
any-
God. There's no evidence that disproves the quantum field. You can't disprove things with
Beautiful.
evidence.
Is there any empirical evidence in which we can see like going back before the Big Bang with 100,000 years that NASA is missing, that the quantum field is responsible?
Yes, there's evidence that the quantum field existed before the Big Bang. Yes. There is no
Is
evidence a
responsible.
consciousness did. What?
Is responsible for the current state of the universe that we live in, like it's the cause of the Big Bang, for example.
Yes. So there's evidence that the quantum field is the most fundamental thing that is responsible for our current state and everything else.
Can I see it?
Sure. It's called quantum field theory. There's evidence of the Casimir effect. Google the Casimir effect. It's great evidence of quantum fields. You can Google the evidence of solving general relativity without the time variable, which means it's outside of time. So yeah, go for it. Casimir effect.
But how can it be outside of time if the time is our constant?
Because time and space is a single kind of field, and there are other kinds of field that exist independent of space-time. So quantum fields exist independent of space-time because there are other fields other than space-time.
Gotcha. I'm gonna go. You said the Casimir.
Casimir,
Casimir effect?
Casimir.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna look into this. I might be back later because I don't want to fight you on it if I haven't read about it.
All right.
My brother, appreciate you.
So, is there anything that would convince you that no gods exist real fast?
Talk, I ain't gonna lie, from the conversations we had, I don't think you could convince me. T-Jump probably could.
I'm thinking the words you used are you don't want to come back and fight T-Jump until you've read on the subject. I'm curious why your expectation is that it would be a fight. Like if you actually read good materials on it.
No, that's not what I meant. Like getting pushed back.
I feel like it would be more likely that you'd be in agreement with T-Jump because T-Jump is extremely well read on these subjects.
No, what he said makes sense. So he
like,
wasn't arguing about that. He wasn't deliberately saying like fight in a combative way. He was just like a debate, just a debate.
Oh, good for getting some pushback.
Converse on it. Okay.
Yeah, I'll let someone else come up. Thank you for your time.
Yep.
Hey, thanks for coming up, Joshua. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
We've got Mary Dilf.
Mary Dilf? Hello, Mary. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Oh, married Dilf. Yeah, we can hear you. How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Great. Thanks for joining us. What's on your mind?
So, I don't know. Is this like specific help? Like, I needed dating advice. Is that something we do here or no?
Well, normally not, but if it's quick, we'd be happy to try to push you in the right direction if we can. But what's going on?
So like as you see, I'm married, right? I've been divorced once. It was over Discord. Like, I married her, and then we divorced within like a month. But this new marriage, I'm just trying to figure out if she's the right one because I don't want that to happen again. You know. So obviously, I met her on politics. But like the thing is, I just enjoy women. You know, I don't know if I'm ready. You know, I enjoy a lot of different women.
Okay,
Don't get married.
so you're going to have to like, you're already married and you're looking to meet somebody else.
Well, I just say we're married. We're not really. This one is more just like just a serious relationship. So
Okay, well, one of the most important things when it comes to serious matters such as marriage, to actually not use the terms flippantly when you're engaging in a relationship with somebody else. Relationships take time. There isn't going to be a quick and easy way to find out if that's the right person for you. The expectation that somebody must be 100% the right person, I think, is unrealistic. Hollywood tries to depict that a lot. You're going to find, I think what tends to work for most people is that you generally agree on more things with your partner, but you may have different points of view as well, and the quality of the relationship can be marked by how well you can converse with your partner on subjects that you disagree with as well as the ones you agree with. And having some different interests as well as similar interests and same interests, I think is very healthy and is a good thing. So it's just something you're going to have to put the time and effort into and find out over time. Spending more time with them is probably going to be the best thing you can do.
I would actually recommend the book Polysecure. There are other kinds of relationships other than monogamous kinds, and they're perfectly natural and normal. And if you understand what your needs are and you can communicate those with your partners and they're okay with that, then that's perfectly fine. So read books like Polysecure by Jessica Fern. And
What's your thoughts on this? So, like,
He Jump is giving excellent advice here. I fully agree with that. I think that's a perfect addition to what I've said.
okay, I'm looking for like a Discord wife, and then like that's just separate from my real life, you know. So then I can still have a wife in real life, and then I have my Discord wife.
same
Is that,
thing.
like,
Okay. Most important thing is that all the parties you're involved with know this about you, so that there's nobody keeping secrets on stuff like this. Because with this kind of open honesty, you will have better relationships down the road.
Okay, sounds good.
I've been married 30 years, and there's stuff I didn't know about my wife until many years later, and same that she didn't know about me, because it's just not possible to know everything about your partner or partners in the beginning. That's just how life goes.
Yeah. Okay. And then I just wanted to make a comment on the guy that was up here earlier about like spirits and that. What was it?
Your audio is starting to cut out a little bit. Could you maybe come a little closer to the mic?
Oh, is this better?
Much better, yeah. Go ahead. What was your comment about the other, what was said earlier?
He was talking about like the devil, and you guys are saying, oh, there's no
demons
evidence
and stuff. Yeah, okay.
So I like, if there's multiple reports, how is that not, you know, evidence? Like, you're saying, oh, you need a certain amount of people to say this. Like, there's been thousands like of reports, but you're saying you need a.
Okay, so what I would suggest researching is the term statistical significance. So it's important that you have a large enough sample size that's appropriate for what it is you're measuring, to be able to make a determination that's more credible. And the larger the sample size, the more credible your conclusion can be.
I would disagree here. So
Okay,
testimony is only evidence for things that have an empirical basis. If you saw a dog or an elephant or giraffe, that's good based off of testimony. If you're saying you're seeing miracles, magic, mythical creatures, paranormal, supernatural, UFOs, no amount of testimony is sufficient, because the human mind is susceptible to lots of problems. So like, if you see an optical illusion, doesn't matter how many people see the painting move, the painting is not moving. So in order for something to be evidence, you need to have empirical evidence of it, independent of testimony. And only after you have an independent empirical basis can testimony be a justification to believe that somebody actually saw that thing.
Oh yeah, I agree with this. I wasn't meaning to say something that would disagree with that. I guess, like, if people are, if they're measuring in psychology, social psychology, then people's opinions would probably be more relevant. But in pure scientific matters, definitely T-Jump is exactly right here. Yeah.
Okay.
But Mary Dilf, do look into statistical significance, because that will be probably helpful to understanding why studies are value having more samples, larger samples than less.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I appreciate it. Thanks for your help, guys.
Thank you for joining us. Appreciate your time.
I just want to shout out my wife because she's watching. Thank you. Bye.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Say hello to her. That's great. Hello, Mary Dilf's wife.
Interesting.
She's tuned in as well. Sorry, what's that, Taco?
That was an interesting one. And then we've got Rizhan.
Rizan. If we're
He's super
pronouncing
muted.
your name, please correct us. It looks like he's got an extra dial next to his microphone.
Yeah, he's server muted, so I'll unmute you, but I don't know why you were muted.
Thank you for joining us. What's on your mind? And please correct us on the pronunciation of your name if we got Rizan wrong.
Yeah, it's just Rizhan, but
Rizan.
I just have like one main question. So earlier, T-Jump and you guys were saying that quantum fields are like necessary, so they exist in all possible worlds. So what type of necessity are you talking about here?
The philosophical kind, where a necessary being is a being that exists in all possible worlds. That's what necessary means.
No, like
There's
I'm
not
asking like the model scope.
what models. That's just the definition of necessary. There's no like
No, the model scope.
the modal scope. What do you mean modal scope? Necessary just means exists in all possible worlds. There's not like an alternative
But
definition
there's
with
different
different
types
scopes.
of necessity.
Not for necessary
There's-
beings. There's not. What are you talking about?
There's epistemic necessity. There's
What?
logical necessity.
So
metaphysical
epistemic
necessity.
necessity is how you know things. Logical necessity is like defining systems of logic. There is no real thing there. When you're talking about ontology, a necessary being is an ontology of a thing that exists in all possible worlds.
Look, so I'm just going to take it that you mean metaphysical necessity, but also just to correct you on logical necessity. Logical necessity just when the negation of that proposition or the negation of the truth of the proposition entails some kind of contradiction, just to correct you there. So
No, that's
if you
incorrect.
take
Actually,
quantum
so
fields to
so
be
that part's wrong because actually there are non-standard
How is it
logics.
wrong?
Because there are non-standard logics that don't entail the same
Yeah, I don't
logical
hold
necessity.
to non-standard logics.
I don't care if you hold to
I
them or
don't
not.
hold to
It doesn't matter if you
non-standard
hold to
logics.
them or not. They're languages. And so saying that your preferred language has this entailment of this specific sentence doesn't mean it's actually necessary. It's just not relevant.
Look, I'm defining logical necessity as defined in the classical logic, which I hold to.
Right. And
If
you're
you hold to some kind of
confusing that
different
to
logic, that's
actual necessity when we're talking about all possible worlds. So logical necessity is just a language. It's not
I
actual
said that
necessity.
you meant wait,
You were just
yeah,
wrong.
I said that
It's
you
not-
meant
you were just
I said
wrong.
that I take wait, I said yeah, I said that I take you mean metaphysical necessity.
Yes, we understood that part. The thing is, there was no other possible way you could have took it. Like unless you're completely ignorant of the field. Like when you're talking about a necessary being, there is no other possible candidate. Logical necessity isn't a candidate for a necessary being.
Yes, there is.
No, there's not. Logical necessity
Yes, there is.
isn't a thing that exists.
There's nomic necessity. There's nomic necessity.
Nomic
There's
necessity,
doxastic necessity.
which also doesn't in any way entail possible ways a necessary being could be. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes,
Sam,
it does.
Okay,
Can
how?
I ask you? Okay, no, finish your conversation, but then I want to ask you.
Look, okay, so let's just move past this point. So
Nope,
since you've
nope.
already
You want to
established
make
that
bullshit
quantum
claims?
field-
Go ahead. How are those alternatives to a necessary being? Go ahead.
I'm not saying that they're alternative to a necessary being. I'm saying that the way necessity is defined here could be different, or the types of necessity could be different.
Okay, how? Go ahead. Provide another definition.
So, for example, like for doxastic or epistemic necessity, right? It would be necessity based on what we know. And for something like nomic necessity, it would be necessity based on the
How
laws of
does
nature,
that relate to a necessary
the
being?
laws of physics.
How does that relate to a necessary
It
being?
does.
What does
So
the
if
word
something-
being mean?
Wait, so if you take something, okay, so you don't think that epistemology entails
What
ontology?
does
You don't
the
think that
word being mean in philosophy?
a
What
being
does the
means an
word
existent thing? I
an
mean, it's a very
existent
primitive term.
thing? What does epistemology mean?
Epistemology is a theory of knowledge.
Does it exist?
I'd say knowledge exists.
No, epistemology does not
it does.
exist. No, it doesn't.
And knowledge exists.
No.
So wait, you don't think that knowledge? You think that knowledge is
Knowledge is not an existing thing. Knowledge is a justified true belief.
so
It
you
doesn't
think-
actually
okay,
exist.
you're an
There's no like
epistemic
knowledge
nihilist.
under a rock anywhere. Knowledge is a justified
I'm
true
not saying that
belief.
it's knowledge under a rock. Look, I'm not saying that. Look, I'm not even necessarily saying that knowledge is
So
some
you
kind
were
of
wrong.
concrete thing.
You're
I'm
wrong.
just asking,
So a being,
does
a
knowledge actually
doxastic
exist?
necessity cannot be a being. It's not a being.
I'm not saying that doxastic necessity can be some kind of being.
You were
I'm just
just
asking
said you made
what
an
type
argument
of
that there is an
necessity are you holding
alternative
to here?
definition of a necessary being, and then you gave doxastic necessity
I'm
and
not saying
hypostatic
that it was
necessity,
an
which
alternative
can't be being.
definition. I was just asking for
I
the
All right,
think he
you're
said
done.
metaphysic
You're
necessity, actually.
Look, okay, so if you're talking about metaphysical, okay, you can actually get onto something substantive. So if you're talking about metaphysical necessity, would you say that since the quantum fields are governed by the laws of nature, then the laws of nature would also be metaphysically necessary?
No, they're not governed by the laws of nature. What a stupid argument. They are the laws
And
of
Yeah,
nature.
I'm pretty sure
And
in
no,
quantum field
Rizan,
theory, they are
before you
governed
go
by
to
the laws of
something
nature.
else, I want to know, why do you think that your God is a necessary being?
Why do I think that I mean, there's multiple arguments for why God would be a necessary being.
Why do you think? Not what are the arguments, but why do you?
I mean, I'd
think?
have to give a very broad
The
outline,
best
but
one.
I'd have to give a very broad outline, but I just go from some kind of fact of our experience. So, for example, there are contingent things, or for example, there are caused things or conditioned things, and then from that, I try and establish that those conditioned things or caused things are put into motion or put into like where they are by some other thing external to them, and this can't go on to infinity of like a Leibnizian cosmological argument. You say that there has to be a necessary thing that explains why all the contingent things are there, and then I'd arrive at a necessary being. And then for stage 2 of the argument, I'd establish some of the attributes of the necessary being.
I was going to say, but you'll notice we're just basically setting up, because now there's still no God yet. And I would even say, we don't have to get into it, but I believe that your God is a contingent thing. And so why do you think your God is
Why do you
not
think that is
only...
contingent? Why do you think that God is contingent?
I would even say I know that God is contingent, but that is a belief. And why do I believe that God's contingent? Because I believe that our gods come from us. I think that they are humanistic gods. They even have human-like traits. And so there's a good chance that if we were to die and all of our media, the books and the movies that had all of these gods, so too would they cease to exist.
And to be clear, you said
Okay, so what's the
humanistic,
justification
not
for that?
humanist.
So what's the justification for that claim?
Because
There's
that
no
seems...
evidence that any of the properties in a god exist fundamentally. It's all just been made up by humans. There's no evidence of consciousnesses existed fundamentally. That's made up by humans. All of the evidence indicates that consciousness is an emergent
Look.
property like potatoes and pineapples. And so to claim that there is a conscious entity that is necessary is equally as stupid as claiming that there is a necessary pineapple. That's how stupid your argument is. Omniscience is contingent on consciousness, which means that property is necessarily of a contingent being and can't be in a necessary being. So your God can't be omniscient. Having desires and intentions are contingent on consciousness. So those things are a part of a contingent being. So if your God has intentions and desires, it's contingent. So all of the properties of your God are contingent, and you've just slapped this label on it, claiming it's necessary with no evidence because it makes you feel good.
Okay, so
Just
I just take that.
Just to clarify, there is lots of evidence that
to
quantum fields could be necessary. That makes sense. Quantum fields can be necessary. There's
Yeah,
evidence they
even
exist
before
outside of space-time.
Even before we go to that, I just take that to be a lot of nonsense, because
What?
again, contingency isn't defined as some kind of dependency. I just take contingency to mean something that could fail to exist. The definition of contingency you're using is just an idiosyncratic definition that nobody uses. Obviously, it's going to be the case that if something has X part and it has a Y part, there's going to be some kind of internal dependency. But the internal dependency wouldn't entail some kind of contingency unless it depends on something that is external to it or ontologically prior to it for its existence. And I also hold to divine simplicity, right? So I hold that God's consciousness is just going to be identical to his active omniscience.
So I already addressed all that. I already addressed everything you just said. I already addressed everything you just said. So
you didn't address it.
I literally did. Stop talking. So consciousness is contingent on other prior things that are ontologically prior. Consciousness is made of other stuff, like a pineapple. A pineapple is made of other stuff. Therefore, like I literally said this, to claim that consciousness is a part of a necessary being is equally as stupid as claiming a pineapple is a part of a necessary being, because all evidence indicates consciousness and pineapples are ontologically made. They're ontologically contingent on other stuff. So to claim that a necessary being has consciousness is to claim that a necessary being is a pineapple. It's that stupid. The only thing that we have evidence that is not contingent on other things is quantum fields. That's the only thing we have evidence that is actually outside of space-time and is actually fundamental. Not consciousness, not omniscience, not knowledge, not intentions, not desires, not motivations. Nothing about your God could qualify as a necessary being. Nothing. It's all human properties that you slapped on this stupid label of divine simplicity, which has no basis in reality. It's just made up. I can just say a pineapple is a divinely simple thing. Is that stupid? Yes, because it's exactly the same thing you're doing. There is no evidence of any of the properties of your God even being possibility of being necessary. The only thing that has a possibility of being necessary is a quantum field. So yes, quantum fields being necessary beings is more supported than your claim, which is equally as supported that there is a necessary pineapple.
Okay, so firstly, when I was talking about the contingency point, I wasn't talking about the contingency of God's consciousness. I was talking about the contingency of God's omniscience, right? Because you said that God's omniscience would be dependent on his consciousness.
What does this have to do with anything I just said? So all of the properties of God are things which
Look,
we
I'm going to
know
get to that
are
if you let me finish.
composites. None of
Look,
the
I'm going
properties
to
of the
get to
quantum
that
field are composite.
if you let me finish. Look, I'm going to get to that.
You're starting with something that's irrelevant and doesn't in any way address any of my points. Skip to the part that actually
Look, I was
matters.
going. That's why I said that I was just
Stop
going
talking
to get
about
to
what
your
you're
point.
going to get to and just get to the part that
Okay,
matters.
so now I'll get to it.
Skip, go.
I'll get to it.
Go.
Okay. So how the Neoplatonists and how we get to a being that's absolutely simple or divinely simple is by saying that, well, there are things in reality which are ontologically composed, which means that they have parts. Now, those parts could have more parts, and then those parts which have more parts also have parts, and then that could just keep on going infinitely. Then we say, well, this can't go on infinitely because that's a per se causal chain, or it's
I don't care about the causal chain. None of this. Stop. Start with the properties that you think exist in God. Consciousness.
Yeah, I just said that. Okay.
Stop.
Okay, so
Stop.
the main properties.
Stop. Consciousness can't be necessary. It is a composite.
Okay, so prove that consciousness is an emergent property.
All of the evidence we have is that it's a composite. That's it. You're done.
I didn't ask you to restate the claims that you made earlier on. I'm giving you a burden of proof.
The burden of proof has already been met in the entire field of neurology, psychology, cognitive science, philosophy of mind. Every single field, there is zero evidence.
I'm not asking you to restate your claim. Stop restating your claim.
Your server muted. So there is zero evidence that consciousness can exist as a singularity. That's just made up bullshit that you hold the burden of proof for. You have to prove that consciousness can be outside of space and time. I don't. All of the evidence is already on my side. The burden of proof has already been met that consciousness is not outside of space-time. That burden has been met. You are making a new claim that it actually does exist outside of space-time, that it's a singularity, that is some pure essence bullshit. And none of that has any basis in reality. It's just shit you've made up in your brain. So you hold the burden of proof to actually demonstrate that. Until you can demonstrate that with empirical evidence, it's just you making shit up. So I've already met the burden of proof. I have empirical evidence that consciousness is material process in all of the fields of science, and there is an abundance of it. And you have no evidence that it is not a necessary being or not a composite. You hold the burden of proof for that.
Okay, so number one, I didn't originally make the claim that consciousness was an emergent property. I was the one that made the claim. You were the one that made the claim. So it just falls.
Okay, so I don't want a reiteration. You just have to go straight to the argument. You're making the claim that your sky daddy is conscious, and that's a necessary being, and this consciousness is necessary. You hold the burden of proof for that. Now, I've met my burden of proof that it's not necessary. There's tons of empirical evidence that consciousness is not necessary. So go ahead, meet your burden of proof, show consciousness is necessary. Provide any empirical examples of a non-spatial temporal consciousness. Go.
I'm not asking you to state the evidence.
I'm not interested in your reiterating the argument. You have a burden of proof. Demonstrate consciousness is non-spatial temporal.
Again, I'm not asking you.
I'm not interested in what you have to say about what I said. I don't care. Don't mention me in any of your sentences. Start with consciousness is necessary because.
Nope, because that's not my burden of proof.
Christian, can I
that
actually
literally is your burden of proof. You claim God is conscious. You claim he's a necessary being, so he must be necessary. That's your burden of proof.
I'm gonna hand it back over to you,
I never
Rich.
claimed that he was conscious.
But
You
Rich,
claimed that he wasn't conscious. Where's your evidence for him not being conscious? You can't just shift the burden of proof when you can't give any evidence.
because consciousness is contingent on other things, and thus he wouldn't be a god under your own definition. But Rizchan, the reason that scientists, biologists, neurologists say that consciousness is an emergent process is because we are pulling in multiple points of sensory data to create a single conscious experience. And thus, that's why we're asking, why would anyone think anything else?
Again, I'm not asking you to restate that you have evidence from neurology or psychology. I'm actually asking you to give an argument, to give proof, to give evidence. You can't just restate your evidence and say that that's the argument. I'm asking you to actually give me a deductive argument or an inductive argument.
We just gave you the evidence. Here's empirical evidence.
No, you didn't give me the evidence.
That's literally what she did. So we've both said these entire academic fields are full of evidence. Like the experiments done on consciousness, there's your evidence. We don't need any more. That sufficiently provides evidence. If you don't understand that, you are stupid. Now, you believe God is conscious, right?
Look, I believe God is conscious, but
yes,
again, that's not my
So
burden
you
of proof.
believe God is conscious, and you believe consciousness is a
Yes, I
necessary
believe that
being,
God is
right?
conscious.
Consciousness is necessary, right?
Yes, I believe that he's a necessary being.
What evidence do you have of that?
I'm still waiting for you to give me the argument of proof that he isn't conscious, because that was your
We've already
original
provided
claim.
that.
That's the claim that you
Consciousness is
made.
like a pineapple. It is a contingent thing that is emergent from other processes. All of the scientific evidence indicates that.
Prove that. I'm not asking you to restate the claim. Prove.
No, we just did. That's the proof. You're done. All of the evidence indicates we're right, you're wrong. That's it. So you have to provide some kind of counter evidence that proves that your position has more support than our position, which means it has to have more support than the entire scientific endeavor of every field. Psychology, philosophy of mind, cognitive science, neurology, all of these fields demonstrate consciousness is an emergent property, which means you have to provide something that's better than all of those fields.
I'm not asking you to state that you have evidence from the
I
field.
don't want to hear what you want. We have evidence from all these fields. What's your evidence that is better than what we just provided?
Give me a deductive or
No, stop talking. We already provided the evidence. You need to provide something that's better than what we just provided. The entire academic fields, neurology, cognitive science, philosophy of mind, neurology. We just provided a hell of a lot of evidence. You have jack shit. What do you have that's better than what we just presented?
Look, you didn't provide.
What do you have that's better than what we presented? I don't want your opinion. I don't care what you think. You're a moron. We provided evidence. The audience knows we provided evidence. Everyone watching knows we provided evidence. The fact that you don't like it, we don't care. What do you have that is better than the evidence we provided? If you have nothing, say you have nothing.
I'm still waiting for the argument.
What do you have? What do you have that's better than the evidence we provided?
Nobody in the audience.
What do you have that's better than the evidence we provided?
I'm still waiting for the argument.
It's been presented. You're done.
Stop stating that you had it.
You're done. The evidence was provided to you. Next.
There is a question from the audience, but Amy, was there something you wanted to add there? Because it sounded like you were trying to get a word in at one point.
Well, I got my main point in between. It's just odd because that is where understandably consciousness is the frontier of science, but so far all evidence points to an empirical means and an emergent process. And so if we're going to say that it is it is part of a necessary being, it is something that has to exist, and so a universe could come about, then there should be some sort of good reason or argument for that.
Okay, great. There is a question from Leo Da Vinci 555. He's wondering if we can explain something. I'll just read the whole thing out and then we can try to address it. I think he's mostly hoping that T-Jump will answer it, because I think he thinks it's in his wheelhouse. Probably is. He's saying no evidence that disproves a hypothesis. So if I have a hypothesis and the collected data contradicts my presumption, that wouldn't qualify as data that disproves my hypothesis.
No, evidence can
and then-
never disprove the hypothesis. So, like, we can say your hypothesis is that the geocentrism, the sun goes around the earth, and we look at all of the data of the solar system that the earth goes around the sun. Does that prove that geocentrism is wrong? No, because we could be in the matrix. We could be in the matrix, and if you wake up, the world could be in the center. So no, the evidence will never disprove geocentrism. It's not how evidence works. It just provides evidence for a different hypothesis.
Okay, the next part of his excellent, thank you. The next part of his last part of his question was because in basic logic, if you have a presumption and under that presumption lies a contradiction, like a conjunction of P and not P, the original presumption becomes negated. So how can data which contradicts my presumption not negate them?
Because it doesn't contradict. As I mentioned before, you could be in the matrix. So having evidence that the heliocentrism is true doesn't contradict geocentrism. It just contradicts it to the apparent level of evidence that we have. And there could just be we're in the matrix, or that we're deluded, or that we're being deceived by magical leprechauns. There's no way to disprove things in science. It doesn't exist.
Fantastic. I think you've probably answered his question very well. Thanks for doing that, T-Jump. We have another person to let's see. I'm not quite sure who's next. I suspect it's probably Seal Man. I recognize that one being there for a while. Welcome, Seal Man. What's on your mind? How are you today? Thank you for joining us.
Hello. So, look, I have a question for T-Jump particularly. So, T-Jump, you hold the view that we can ground like morality independent of God,
Yes, like most academic philosophers.
and the sort of way you'd ground it is you'd say that like you base objective morality or the best of all possible worlds off of like the least involuntary imposition of will.
No, that would just be the definition.
Mm-hmm. So wait, okay. So to be clear, you define the best of all possible worlds as like involuntary impositions of will.
That's the definition of morality. Immorality is an involuntary imposition of will. The grounds of objective morality is just anything like objective morality is defined as a truth claim that is stance independent. So just if there's something that makes moral claims true independent of opinion, it's objective morality. So if a platonic object exists that is a moral platonic object, objective morality would be true without God. If there's a law of physics that makes it true, it would be true without God. If a priori abstracts were existed, that would make morality true without God. If God existed, morality would be subjective and you would not have objective morality. And so you can't have objective morality with God. So yes, there are lots of ways to ground objective morality without God. The way I define objective morality is based on any involuntary imposition of will is immoral. And so what I think the objective moral standard is the best of all possible worlds, where it's impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. That's what I think is the perfect moral world.
Mm-hmm. So my question is, why would I grant that involuntary impositions of will are immoral?
Because it follows the evidence of morality. So the evidence of morality we have are patterns in moral intuition, moral progress, and moral dilemmas. That's all of the evidence anybody has in every field, including God, including the Bible, for what morality is. And so we find a pattern in those things, and anything that deviates from those patterns, like a God that drowns millions of babies, that would go against the pattern of morality, or a God that condemns people to hell without their consent, that goes against the pattern of morality. That's a bad theory of morality. A good theory of morality would be a continuation of the pattern, one that says, okay, if this pattern keeps going, where would it lead to? Mine follows the pattern, which is why epistemically you would say it's better than a God hypothesis that breaks the pattern.
Yeah. So why can you please give me a sort of moral dilemma or like any sort of evidence as to why our moral intuitions point towards the fact that like involuntary impositions of will are always immoral?
Sure. So there's an example of doctors. There's a doctor in the 1800s and he's trying to save your life. You've been shot in the leg. The doctor in the 1800s will cut your leg off, and he is moral for doing so because that's the best he can do to try to save your life. If a modern doctor in the 2000s was trying to save your life from a gunshot wound and he cut your leg off, you would sue him for malpractice because he is causing excess harm than what he has the means to provide, because he has antibacterials. He can give you a shot of antibacterials and he doesn't need to cut your leg off. So the same action of cutting your leg off, when you have more power, becomes immoral. So the greater the amount of power you have, the less you are justified to cause gratuitous suffering. So if there is a God with infinite power, the continuation of this pattern would be that he is the least justified to cause any harm to anyone ever. A violation of this pattern would be God drowning millions of babies. That's with infinite
Look,
power, he is not justified to do that. So that pattern of more power, you are less justified to cause harm, is a violation of the God hypothesis, because God violates that pattern a lot.
yeah. So my question is one, first of all, the analogy you gave me was if there's a doctor and then they're trying to save your life and they
Yeah.
cut your leg off,
Yeah.
that's like immoral. But my question is, if you think that any sort of involuntary imposition of will is immoral, you'd also have to grant that he'd be wrong for doing that, right? Whereas most people would also say that the doctor would be perfectly morally justified in cutting your leg off if it was to save your life, even if it did hurt you. So
No,
even if he
so
involuntarily imposed himself, it would still be morally
remember, the involuntary imposition applies if you have infinite power. So if you have infinite power, cutting his leg off would be immoral. Absolutely, 100%, because like the doctor in the 2000s, he cut your leg off. That's immoral. Why is that immoral? Because he has the power to save your life by doing a less harmful means, by giving you an antibacterial. Now, if you're an all-powerful God, giving someone an antibacterial like a shot, if they didn't want the shot, would be immoral because you can do it in a less invasive way. So the proportion of the morality is relative to the power that you have. If you're infinitely
Look,
powerful, if you do anything that the other person doesn't want, that's immoral. So it applies to
yeah.
God.
So my question is again, one, I don't think I'd grant that specifically, even if you were infinitely powerful, if you do any specific action, then it would be immoral. For
Without
example,
people's
it'd be like,
consent.
yeah, to without people's consent either. So for example, it'd be like an infinitely powerful being decides that they want to feed their child, don't feed their child like food. Their child really doesn't want to eat food, right? But if they didn't have the food, then they die. Even an infinitely powerful being could feed them the food anywhere, even if they didn't want it, right? In a way in which they didn't want. But nobody would say that they are still morally unjustified for saving a child's life, right? Even if they may
Oh, no, no.
cause them a mild
So pause, pause. This is the
so,
kid problem. This
uh,
is a terrible analogy
mhm,
because people just don't understand. Kids
yeah,
would not, it would be immoral to create a child who is intellectually incapable of understanding its own situation. So if a God existed, he would only be able to create conscious agents who had the knowledge and intelligence of adults. So if there is an adult
right?
who does not want to eat and the God
Wait,
forces that adult to eat, that's immoral. Yes.
why? Yeah, wait. Why do you think people's intuitions will say to us like if there's like an adult who
But
doesn't want to
no, no,
eat,
no.
even
The
though
point
wait,
of
so,
kids is kids are
wait,
limited by
can I
biology.
like can I finish the example? So
I already
it's
understood
like
your question.
no, I didn't get out. So it's like if
I
there
know,
was an
I know.
adult who like really, really wanted to eat, but for example, didn't understand the means in which he was able to get that food. And then the way you show him how to get the food, he doesn't like it. So he doesn't want to do it. But if he doesn't do it, then he'll die. Even if you're an infinitely powerful being, why would I grant that people's intuition suddenly sway towards the view that you shouldn't feed him the food? Like
Right.
even regardless of what he wants.
Because that would be assault. Like if there is a
Wait,
human who does not want to eat and you force
uh-huh.
them to eat, that's literally assault. That's
Do you not
immoral.
think people would no? Okay, wait. One, do you not think people would still say that the action of like saving somebody's life by forcing them to eat, even if they don't want to,
Yes, that's
is
immoral.
morally just?
That's immoral.
Yeah.
That's
Wait.
horribly
Why?
immoral.
Why do you think? Yeah. Why
Because
do you
we
think
already know it is.
genuinely? Yeah. Wait. You said people's moral intuition sway towards that view, but do you have
Yes.
any evidence for that?
Yes, there's
Yeah. Do
tons
you
of it.
have
It's
any
called
evidence?
slavery.
Wait. Slavery does not involve forcing people to do things that benefit them, even regardless of if they want it.
It
If they
doesn't matter
want to.
if it benefits them. The benefit part is irrelevant. Forcing people to do things they don't consent to doing is slavery. It doesn't matter whether it's beneficial or unbeneficial is irrelevant. The benefit is
Okay.
irrelevant.
So to be clear, you take the view that like if a mother forces her child to go to
No,
school even
again,
if they don't when
children
they don't
don't
want to,
count
that's
because
slavery.
children are
Okay.
mentally handicapped.
Mhm.
Mentally handicapped
Okay.
people don't have autonomy. They don't have the ability to consent. People who are
Wait,
mentally
they don't have
handicapped
the
and
ability.
children don't have the ability to consent.
Okay.
Consent,
So if there
violations of
was an
consent
adult, mhm.
apply to adults. So an
Okay.
adult
Mhm.
who doesn't want to eat, if you force them to eat, yes, that's assault, that's immoral.
Yeah. Okay. So if there was an adult, for example, who like there was this set code of life which people had to live by to make society as like useful as possible,
Yeah,
right? And it benefited everyone in society.
yeah.
They really didn't want to learn it, right?
Yeah.
However, by them not learning it, they would deeply, like what's it called, they would deeply inhibit society's progression.
Yes.
You think that taught it to that person anyway, people would consider that not only
Yes,
slavery, but
that's slavery. Yes.
heavily immoral.
Yes.
Right? Wait,
Yes.
you also think people would say that's heavily immoral?
Yes. If you are forcing people
Yeah,
to learn
okay, why would
things,
I grant that?
if you don't grant it, you don't understand morality. If you're forcing
Wait,
people to do things for society that they don't want to do, that's slavery. Yes.
okay. So you agree that if there's like, so if there are prisoners who want to do like, who like are being forced to do community service to rehabilitate them, you'd say that's immoral to do, right?
Yes, in the
Like
best of all possible worlds, if
enslavement,
we could
right?
just like cure their disease, that would be the best option.
Wait,
Yes.
okay. And so to be clear, whenever you said that the sort of justification you have for your view is because it aligns with people's moral intuitions, right? But then
Moral
my question
intuitions,
is,
moral progress, and the
mhm,
moral dilemmas. That's all
yeah.
the
So
evidence of
my
morality that
question is,
exists.
yeah. So my question is, why would I grant that people's intuitions go to like sway towards that view? You can't just say, oh, well, people's intuitions do without giving any sort of justification for that.
Well, the justification is the patterns of all of the changes of moral intuition and progress and moral dilemmas over time. So, if you want a particular example, like in the case of prison, people would see prison as immoral if there was a less invasive way to solve the problem, which would be like curing them, or like the Norwegian prisons. The Norwegian prisons are more moral
Mhm.
than the American prisons. American prisons force people to do manual labor. Norwegian prisons don't. They are more
Yeah,
moral.
and
So we can
yeah.
see
Do you think people
the
hold that
forcing
view?
people to do work is immoral. It is not the most moral thing to do.
Wait, do you think people like okay, do you think people generally hold the view that if there's like a rapist, for example, who's like raped thousands of people, that if the two options are put him in a Norwegian prison or put him in an American prison, why would people want to like grant that we should like put him in a place where he's more comfortable, in
Yeah,
a
their
place
moral
where he like
intuitions
enjoys
agree that yes, it's more moral
yeah.
to put him in the
Why?
prisons where he's comfortable. They have other
Why?
feelings. They want revenge. That's not a moral intuition. Revenge is not a moral intuition, or wanting to punish someone isn't a moral intuition. That's a different feeling
Wait,
altogether. So the fact that they have different kinds of feelings about the situation and they want to punish or
you don't
revenge or
think
cause suffering to him
mhm.
as retribution isn't a moral intuition. That's a
Wait,
revenge
okay.
intuition. So,
Yeah,
but they
what do you
all
count as a
agree,
moral intuition?
the moral thing to do would be to let him go. Like that's just like
Yeah, okay.
universally agreed. The moral thing to do would be to
Mhm.
turn the other cheek, as Jesus put
Yeah.
it.
That's an empirical claim, but it's fine. But look, why would I? What do you take are the necessary and sufficient conditions for something to be a moral intuition?
Um, that is a question for the specific field of ethics and philosophy, but it's pretty
No, wait. To be
common.
clear, when you said that revenge, like feelings of revenge, weren't moral intuition.
Yeah.
So now I'm asking you, what's the sort of trait that is true for one but not true for the other? Where you can say one is a moral intuition and one isn't.
Well, people can understand that their desire for revenge isn't moral. So if they say, "Oh, I have a desire for revenge, but it's immoral," then clearly their moral intuitions are different.
Yeah, they can. Do you not think people can have two conflict like, or they can, after rational reflection, they can say, "Oh yeah, even though I have this like intuition, and I think that would be good to do in this current moment, right? After
No, no,
reflecting on the sort
that's
of
something
consequences
different.
of
If
this
someone says,
moment,
"I have a desire for revenge," but
yeah,
clearly it have a different desire for morality, they're separate
right?
things, then clearly they're
But
not
no,
the
no,
same
no. They
intuition.
think
So,
at the
like,
moment
if
they
you
think
had a
that
desire for revenge and said, "This is the moral thing to do," that would be a moral intuition. That would be your moral
yeah.
intuition. You
Wait,
think it's moral for
do you not
revenge.
think
But
people?
if you can
Mhm.
identify that you want revenge and you know it's not immoral, then it's not a moral intuition. It's a different thing.
Wait, okay. So to be clear, do you not think that whenever people are making moral like decisions, right, their emotions are not also playing a factor into that?
Of course, their emotions are playing a factor into that, but that doesn't have anything to do with
Wait,
morality.
so to be clear, their moral intuitions are actually like info, or they are inclusive of emotions as well, right?
I have no idea what you just said. You're very quiet.
Wait, so their moral intuitions are inclusive of emotions as well, right?
Their moral intuitions are a kind of thing, and emotions are another kind of thing. Can they bleed over some? Yes, but that's irrelevant to anything we've just
No,
said.
no, 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 no. Okay, so to be clear, I just take like sort of moral situations typically, or whenever you have moral intuitions to be how people should guide their actions, which would include yourself. So if you have any sort of intuition which may force you or motivate you to act a specific way, right, over any of the other alternative ways, then it would be a moral intuition.
No,
So maybe
no,
using
that's
people.
literally stupid. So
So why? So what do you think people mean when they say something is
a
like
moral
immoral or
intuition is a specific kind of emotion that relates to feelings of morality. That's a specific thing. There are lots of
And
feelings you
what
have.
does
I have
morality
feelings
mean
of
then?
stop talking. There are lots of feelings you have. You have feelings of hunger and anger and disgust and lots of different feelings you have that have nothing to do with morality. There are tons of feelings. Most of them have nothing to do with morality. There is a specific set of moral feelings that you have. Those are the moral intuitions. There are lots
Yeah,
of
okay.
other feelings you have that have nothing to do with morality. Those are not the moral intuitions.
Okay, so my question is, so you said that we have a whole bunch of like moral feelings. So
Sure.
my question is, what makes something a moral feeling under
If
your view?
you feel that it has to do with morality, it's a moral feeling.
Yeah,
That's it.
it's okay. And when people are saying, "Oh yeah, this thing has something to do with morality," what do you think they mean when they say that?
What?
Okay, if I say this thing, or if I have two different emotions, right? One of them is my emotional drive to go and eat a burger right now. The other one is like my emotional drive to like punish all wrongdoers or all people who do evil, right? What makes one of those a moral intuition, or is
The
the other
fact
one
that you
not?
feel it is immoral. That's
Under
it.
your view. Uh, what? The fact that you feel it is moral.
Yes. If
Okay,
it is related to your moral feelings, it is a moral feeling. That's it. You could be
yeah,
wrong. You could have very specific moral feelings that have no relation to everyone else in society, and that's the thing. That is genuinely a thing. Sociopaths exist, but they don't
uh-huh.
matter to the trend. So all of the
Yeah,
evidence is how do the vast majority of people tend to feel about moral things? That's the bulk of the evidence. So when you've asked the
so,
vast
so
majority of
mhm,
people, is it right to torture criminals? They say no, that's
yeah,
immoral. That is the
yes. So
consensus view.
okay,
So some
okay.
people disagree,
Thank
but we don't
you.
care. We don't care about the
Yeah,
minority of
okay.
people. The majority
Thank
of
you
the
for using
evidence
the
is
word
the
right
fact that
there.
most people believe it is wrong to torture criminals. And the right thing to
Mhm.
do is to let them go. That is the moral thing to do, to turn the other cheek. That is the consensus view of the majority of evidence.
Yeah, okay. So thank you for using the word right there for me. So look, whenever you ask the average person, like what's it called, would it be right for me to like stab this guy in the chest for killing my mother? Right? When they say, oh yeah, it would be right or it would be wrong, what do you think that word right or wrong means?
Right. Most of them would say you'd be wrong. That is the consensus of
No,
evidence.
that doesn't answer the question. Like, what do you think they mean when they say right or wrong?
They mean lots of different things. It's
Okay, so when you
irrelevant to the topic. Go back to the topic.
so when
Moral
you say okay, yeah,
intuitions, the evidence of moral intuitions is that pretty much everybody agrees torturing revenge is immoral. That is the consensus view. Are there a few who disagree? Yes. Do I care?
because
No.
wait, okay, because you said most people disagree or agree with this view because, and like, what's the reason why I should grant that? Like,
What
I can also,
it's
I can
it's a
also just
fact. The
see,
fact that they agree or disagree is just a fact. Like you can just look
wait,
at the moral polls. There are lots of polls of what people think is moral and immoral, and there's just a
wait,
trend of data. You can just look at the trend of data. It's a fact.
look, that doesn't answer my question.
What?
So look, the question I'm asking, yeah, okay, I'm going to specify. The question I'm asking you specifically is your view is that every single instance of involuntary imposition of will is immoral,
Yeah.
right? And the evidence you're using for that is more intuition and more progress, right? And more dilemmas. And then when I ask you, okay, why do you think most people's moral intuitions or moral progress point towards the fact that every single involuntary imposition of will is immoral? You just tell me it's obvious, but that isn't
Oh, wait,
enough.
wait, wait, wait. Oh, wait. So the conclusion that every involuntary imposition of will is immoral is the end of the argument. So the trend indicates that society thinks that more involuntary impositions are wrong as we gain more power. So as we gain more power, there are more involuntary impositions that we see as immoral. This trend, if we follow it to its extreme, would be that every involuntary imposition would be immoral. But that's the
Yeah.
conclusion. That's not where we are today in society. Today in society, we are not at the point where everyone feels that every imposition is wrong. That's not where we are today. That is the projected conclusion of if this trend continues forever.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just going to ask you the question. Like the question now is like, why do you think people have intuitions generally that the more power you gain, therefore certain sort of like impositions of will are immoral?
That is the historical trend. That is a proven fact. Women's rights, LGBTQ rights, slavery rights, workers' rights, child rights, animal rights, literally just a fact. It's a fact that that is the case.
Okay. Look, I can grant that it's a fact that as like society progresses, then they believe that like sort of imposing on people's will for no reason, right, or due to some like arbitrary distinction, that would be wrong. right? But when you say involuntary impositions of will simpliciter, right, that's the sort of view I wouldn't grant. Like, I think most people who
That's
grant that,
again,
but
that's not the part you need to grant.
wait,
That part's irrelevant. That's the
to be
conclusion.
fair,
That's the part at
to
the
be
end of
fair,
the graph. So wait, do you
most
understand how a graph works?
Mhm.
There is a
Yes,
trend,
I
a trend
understand how a
line.
graph.
So we have a bunch of data that is the beginning of the trend line, and you say, my hypothesis is that if this trend line continues, there's something very far in the future that will be the conclusion. So
Okay.
if you grant the conclusion, you have to look at the trend line and say, does the trend line point in that direction? So for you to grant that any involuntary imposition of will would be wrong, all you need to do is say, if you look at the trend line of human history, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, workers' rights, animal rights, is the trend that as we gain more and more power, less impositions are justified? Is that the trend?
Okay. So now that you're done with that,
No, that's
like
the question. This is
the
a question. Do you see that the trend,
Mhm.
as we gain power, less impositions are morally justified? Is that, do you
I
agree that that
grant that,
trend
like,
exists?
yes, simpliciter,
Okay,
less
okay, wait.
impositions
So
will
if that
actually
trend continues infinitely, what would be the conclusion of the trend?
I think the conclusion of the trend would be like imposing on somebody's will without any sort of justification would be immoral. Like, obviously, I don't think that actually implies any sort of mind independent system of like,
What?
yeah, this is mind independently immoral. Why can't it just be some shared sort of subjective standard that we all share?
It could.
Why would I grant
That's irrelevant. That's irrelevant to the hypothesis. So
like,
the hypothesis here is
okay,
that this is the trend. If the trend continues, here is the thing. Now I have another part that I think this is because it's a natural law or something. But that part
yeah, okay.
that's part you don't have to grant at all. That part's just a part of the hypothesis. You can say there's a different
Mhm.
hypothesis if you want. That's perfectly fine.
Okay, so yeah, my question now is, after we've gone all of that out of the way, what reason is there to grant that the reason why people have these more intuitions is because of some like objective facts of the world,
Well,
rather
I
than
make
we're just
predictions that the
assuming.
same patterns would exist in all life throughout the universe and in AI. So if there was other life forms, they would follow the same pattern anywhere in the universe. If there's
Wait,
AIs that come about, they will discover the same pattern without having to be told. And if that's the case, that would be a
okay,
good reason to believe that this is some fundamental pattern in the universe that isn't just constructed by
so
evolution.
why can't we all just be becoming sensitive to some shared subjective standard that we all seem to hold in the
if
world?
if there's a shared subjective standard between literally every conscious agent in the universe, that would not make sense. If there's
Why?
Because it's subjective. So the fact
Ooh,
that all conscious agents subjectively happen onto the exact same belief structure, coincidentally, everywhere in the universe is
y-
unexpected. That is weird. If
why?
Because
It's
it's
like
subjective. If they come
okay,
across an idea that's
that's subjective.
objective, like say mathematics, 1 plus 1 equals 2, that would be expected because it corresponds to reality. It's objective. If they all come to the same belief in Harry Potter, like if we discovered the
Mhm,
book of Harry Potter in every single planet on in the universe, every conscious agent
mhm,
all created the same book of Harry Potter, that would be weird. No one's gonna predict that. No one's gonna be like, well, could it just be the case that it's all just fiction, that they all just happened on it at the same time? That would be weird. What would be
okay.
expected was if there was like
Mhm.
actually existed in some case, and they're using magic
Yeah,
to communicate with every other planet, and then it would be like objectively, it makes sense that if Harry Potter is real, that why every single universe has a book of Harry Potter. So if
um,
all life everywhere in the universe that is completely separated all discover the same truths, it is more likely that those truths are objective, like math or logic or
uh-huh,
physics, because there's some fundamental truth in the universe that they're grabbing onto, rather than that
okay,
it's just a subjective belief that they all happened upon randomly. That would not make sense. That is an incoherent belief to think that every single conscious agent in the universe would happen on the same belief system by chance. Is it possible? Yes. Is
okay,
it more likely? No.
okay. So look, the way in which you'd actually establish that this thing is more likely is by giving me some piece of evidence or piece of evidence or piece of data which is accounted for under your hypothesis, but not accounted for under mine,
I just
right?
did.
But it seems to be clear.
I,
It
I
seems
just
as
I
if they're
just did
both
that.
equally explained. Wait, so it seems as if they're both equally explained. And then the sort of analogy I'll give you is like take sports disputes, wherever people are disputing who's a better footballer, right? It seems as if we can converge onto Messi or Ronaldo being the best footballer without there being an objective stance independent fact of like one, how do we determine who's a better footballer? And two, like fucking or two, like what's it called? Who is the best
Yes,
footballer?
yes, okay,
Like
stop, 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 stop,
it
stop,
doesn't
stop,
seem as if
stop,
that's
stop,
what I
stop,
expect them
stop,
under that
stop,
view.
stop. If
Okay,
aliens
okay.
from a different planet concluded that
Uh-huh.
Messi or Ronaldo were the best players, having never seen soccer, and their entire planet knows this, and every planet in the universe knows this, having never met them, having never seen soccer, knowing nothing about the rules of soccer, would you guess that was just a subjective belief they happened on, or that there's probably some fundamental thing that ties it all together in the universe? Which would be the better explanation?
Wait, what? That's disanalogous.
No, it's exactly analogous. So this is
No,
the claim. Every
I
single
guess
society in the universe all comes to the
Mhm.
exact same belief system when they have
Yep.
no connections to one another. So suppose it's something arbitrary like who's the best soccer player?
Yep.
Like if every other planet believed that Messi
Uh-huh.
was the best soccer player, having never met him, having never heard of him,
Mhm.
having never
Yep.
heard of soccer, what
Yep.
would be the better explanation? That it was just a
Yeah.
subjective belief they happened to happen upon, or that there's some objective force in the universe causing
Mhm.
all life to have this belief? Which one is the better
Yeah.
explanation?
Yeah. So the reason why that's disanalogous,
No,
first
I
of
don't.
all,
Stop talking about
wait,
whether it's
wait,
analogous. Answer the question.
wait,
If
okay.
every single planet that had life on it
Mhm.
had people that had this belief, Messi is the
Mhm.
best soccer player. They
Yeah.
don't know what it even means. They have no idea. They just have this belief in them. Messi is the best soccer player. They don't know what soccer is. They don't know who Messi is. What's the better explanation? That
That okay.
that is just a
Wait. So
random belief that came about in all
or
planets?
you,
Or would it,
yeah.
or
Look,
would you have a better hypothesis that there's something
it
causing
would.
that belief to
Okay.
exist in all of them?
Yeah. So to be clear, I'm unsure if I would even grant that it would be better explained by there being some objective fact that they're coming to sense. You could literally explain that through a variety of reasons. So the way I explain it personally is
You can
that
explain
if everyone
everything through a
seems
variety of reasons. That doesn't matter.
to be clear. So again, the way I'd explain the moral convergence is maybe people are just converging onto a specific sort of fact about what sort of like what's the way in which is most efficient for people to like conduct their lives. However, I don't think people would grant that that is identical to what is good or what is bad, right? Because obviously there might be some way which like you like some hypothetical way in which is best for people to conduct their lives, whereas everyone agrees that that way is actually completely gratuitously immoral. Right? So again, I think like people can actually converge on like these sorts of standards without there being any sort of objective factor that matter. Right? Even like what's it called? Even in all of these situations, and it still wouldn't be them becoming sensitive of some moral fact, right? But could be them becoming sensitive of literally any other type of fact. It could be them becoming sensitive to a fact about what's best to live or what's the most practical sort of principles they could apply to their life.
No,
And why
that
should I
wouldn't make
grant that
sense.
it's
Again,
more? Why?
the reason I'm bringing up all the different planets and all the different kinds of species everywhere in the universe is because they're all going to have different, most efficient ways to live. They're different
Okay,
unless they're
yeah, then
exactly the
I
same.
just don't
So it would
grant that
be
they'd be
very
convergent.
unexpected for them all to come to the same moral beliefs if they all have different ways they can live and different, more efficient ways to do things.
Yeah, I just don't
Because
think there'd be convergence then.
what?
I don't think there'd be convergence.
Right. That's
That's
why it
what.
would be unexpected. It would be unexpected under the hypothesis that morality is subjective for
Mhm.
all species who have all variety of different ways to live that are more efficient
Yeah.
to all come to the same belief. That would be
And that would
unexpected.
even be expected under the hypothesis that morality was mind independently true. That everyone's just like coming towards
If it's an
this certain
objective
sort of
fact
yeah.
of the universe,
Wait,
it would be
wait,
expected in the
to
same
be
way that
clear,
physics is
to
expected.
be clear, to be
So
clear, to
so
be clear.
stop.
I guess I'm not gonna be
If
able to
we
respond.
understand like that
Uh-huh.
physics is independent of us, it's a thing. Like gravity is a thing that exists
Do you
independent of
think we
us,
can
and they
do you
interact
think
with
we
it.
can
Stop
converge
talking.
towards
Stop
physics
talking.
existing
Stop
without
talking.
us knowing
Stop
anything about
stop talking. So, if morality is a law of physics like gravity that permeates the universe, then the fact that all of the different species would all come to the same conclusions about morality would be expected, just like the fact that they would all come to the same conclusions about gravity or mathematics is expected because it's a force that permeates the universe that affects everybody. That if this was the case, it would be expected that morality is objective. That would be expected. If it's subjective, we would not expect them to converge. We would not expect them to have the same things. So yes, the fact that everyone would converge on the same moral feelings would be expected if morality was a law of physics and universal and objective, like I think it is, like physics. That's the hypothesis.
Theo man, can I ask you, do you believe that morality is objective or subjective?
I'm an anti-realist, but to respond to what T-Jump said, right? Look, it's like I can grant maybe
Does
that
that
under
mean
this,
objective or subjective?
Anti-realism
I
means
don't-
subjective.
no, okay. You know
Yes, it
what?
does.
It's fine. Okay, it's fine. Look, I just okay. You know what? It's fine. Look, so to be clear, to respond to what you
Okay.
just said, T-Jump, right? I just don't think I think like okay maybe I could grant that under the specific type of convergence that you're talking about, where people do not like are not sensitive of this fact at all, they do not interact, they do not witness any sort of involuntary impositions of will, yet they suddenly get this epiphany that oh this thing is wrong, right? Maybe I could even grant that okay it might seem a little bit plausible that that would be like that could point towards some objective fact, right? I could still man that. However, that just isn't how we observe convergence occur. So when you tell me that from observing convergence, we come to this sort of conclusion, or it lends credence towards the fact that morality is mind independent, or there's a mind independent moral standard, right? Just like what you're saying, or the sort of evidence you have, right, just isn't there. It doesn't exist, right? You're making sorts of claims about morality, and then the evidence that you're using, and no, the sort of like threshold for evidence you have just doesn't exist. It isn't present. Right?
Yes,
So
that's we
wait,
already admitted that.
maybe
So this is a prediction
wait,
about something we would find in the future. So you're saying things that I've already
no,
admitted.
no,
Like
no, 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 no,
obviously
no,
this
no.
doesn't exist yet, or else I'd be proven correct. This
Do
is a
you think?
hypothesis.
Mhm.
And this
Okay, do you think
if we
that like
discovered that all the different species in the universe converged on morality and AIs who don't experience the same
using
kind of stuff, then that would be evidence that I was correct.
okay,
We
you're
haven't
using
discovered that
okay,
yet.
to be clear, what do you take evidence to be?
Um, what do I take evidence to
Okay,
be? Like anything that is
yes.
increases the probability that the hypothesis is true? What?
Okay. And you do not think that any of the, okay. And now, just to be clear, you think that after looking at more intuition and more progress, they like you know, at least in this world, they increase the probability of
No, that's
like
just the
more realism?
hypothesis. So that is building the hypothesis. The evidence that my hypothesis would be correct would be if we discovered that all the other species converged on the same patterns. That would be evidence my model is correct. My model is just a hypothesis. I see a pattern in the data and I build a hypothesis off that model. Then I make predictions. And if the predictions are confirmed, that's the evidence
Mhm.
my model is correct. So my model
Okay.
does not have that yet. That's a prediction that it might be discovered in the future.
Okay.
Just using the current models of moral intuition, progress, and moral dilemmas is just the data. And I'm making a prediction based off that data. And if my prediction
Yeah.
is true, then that would be evidence of my
Mhm.
hypothesis.
Yeah. My question is like, okay, if you do not take the view that you have any sort of evidence for more realism, well, why you after looking
I
at the
like it.
data, why does it sway you to okay? So the reason why you're a more realist isn't because there's any evidence, is because you
So
like it?
you seem to have a misunderstanding about how scientists make ideas. Every scientist likes an idea and they accept it and then they make predictions based off it. Einstein
I don't
accepted
see
general
that.
relativity before he had evidence for it. He just said, I find a pattern, I like the solution, this is it, I think it's true. And then he looked for
Okay.
data. This is how everything in science works. You find a
Yeah.
hypothesis you like, you look for data, you accept it way before you find any data.
Okay. So look, I don't think that's how scientists construct a hypothesis.
Literally,
That
no.
just
This is
sounds like
literally
an
just a common
wait, that
fact that
just
it's
sounds like
known.
another empirical claim that you can't prove.
No,
Do you
this
have
has
evidence
been
for that?
proven. Like Einstein accepted general relativity before he had evidence. He liked it.
Yeah. Can you yeah, okay. So he
He's
accepted it
literally
before he
said it. You
thought
could
that
just
there was
find
any
quotes of like, I think this is
yeah.
true before he actually did any of the tests
But can you like even give me a vague idea of these quotes? Can you tell me what he said?
that he thinks it's true.
Okay. Do you think he said he thought it was true before there was evidence?
Yes. That
Okay.
it's
Yes.
a very,
Okay.
very common thing among
This is
pretty much every scientist ever. They always
yeah.
think it's true before there's evidence. The
Yeah.
Higgs
This is
boson,
literally
he
just
thought it was true
spamming
before there was
empirical claims
evidence.
without evidence. Yeah.
Like
Okay. Look,
how do you
that
not know
sounds like
this?
you're
Like
spamming
how do you
empirical
not know
claims.
how obvious this is? Higgs boson is a great example. Higgs found a pattern in nature. He He predicted a particle, the Higgs boson. He thought it was real. There was no evidence for it for 40 years. He always thought it was real. Most of the scientific community thought it was real before it was ever discovered, before there was any empirical evidence whatsoever, because they liked it. It worked well. It made sense. It fit their models. That's all you need. Like, you take the data, you have an interpretation of that data. There's always going to be an infinitely many alternative interpretations. It's just the problem of underdetermination. And the scientists accept the ones they like the best and work with those to make predictions. And then when the predictions are discovered, they're justified in that belief. But they don't need that. They pick the ones they like and use those to try to make predictions. And that's how you make progress in science. Literally, that's all it is. Pick one you like, try to make predictions.
Okay, now that you're done, so look, maybe you might have just seen different like scientists than me. Maybe like in the T-Jumpian view of science that they think that.
No,
But
this
it's
is
like,
this
look,
is a well-known
I
thing in
think,
science. This is the
yeah, I
Feynman
think that
thing. Everybody knows
typically,
this. This is extremely
yeah,
common.
okay, yeah, but everyone knows it. But you can't cite me a single source where it says
Yeah, because it's like citing a source for the sky is blue. It's just so common. I don't have any sources. Just everybody already
eyes,
knows it.
your eyes. Okay, look,
Yes,
it's
go
fine.
ask a
So,
scientist. Go ask a scientist.
um,
Did you believe your hypothesis before it was? Go ask
uh-huh,
any string theorist.
yeah.
Do you guys
Do you
believe in
not
string
think?
theory
Okay,
before it was discovered? Yes. Go ask any, I don't know, multiverse. Any multiverse theorist. Sean Carroll. Do
okay.
you believe in
Are
the
you done?
multiverse even though it hasn't been discovered? You're like, duh. Of course I do. That's why I spend all of my day working on every one of these possible hypotheses in physics, even though they've never been discovered. Hey, wimps. Do you believe in wimps even though they've never been discovered? Yes. Yes, I do. Do you believe in dark matter even though dark matter has never been discovered? Yes. Yes, I do. This is literally just the base layer of just understanding how humans motivate themselves. If you don't know this, you're dumb. It's like
Okay.
saying the sky is blue, asking for evidence the sky is blue. And I say, use your eyes. You're like, no, that's not evidence. You're an idiot. This is extremely common knowledge.
Okay. So now that you got that off your chest, so look, typically whenever people are making hypotheses, it's either A, they have some direct evidence for it, which directly increases the probability, or B, it like is necessary for the best explanations of the like phenomena that they
No,
see. Okay.
no,
And wait, wait,
literally no,
to be fair,
literally, literally that isn't science at all. Do wimps best explain the data? No. Do new particles best explain the data? No. Are there billions of different types of new particles that can all explain the data in every possible thing in physics? Yes. Does string theory best explain the data? No. Does multiverse theory best explain the data? No. Does it make the most sense to those guys? Yes. Is there a lot of debate about all the different possibilities? Yes. Does any of that matter? No. It's irrelevant. People pick the theory they like the best, that fits their best background knowledge, that they feel is most intuitively true to them, and then they try to do work on it, even though it hasn't been proven. This is extremely basic knowledge. Pick any of the modern theories in physics and you just ask them, has this been proven? Like, no. Do you still think it's true? Yes, because it fits the past data. That's all you need. Look for a pattern in the past data, make a prediction, and make predictions. The exact same thing I'm doing. Look at the pattern in the past data of moral intuitions, moral progress, moral dilemmas, make a prediction. That's it. This is not hard. Like this is not an interesting topic or an interesting objection to bring up at all.
Okay. So now that you're done with that, that's cool. I guess since you don't have any evidence for
Hey,
your view.
can I just like ask you, Sealman, not to do like the passive aggressive thing?
He called me an idiot, but it's fine. So it's cool. So look, T-Jump, after admitting that you don't have any evidence for your view,
Well, I admitted
and
that
that the
before you came on.
motivation,
Like that was the thing.
yeah,
Like I
and the
literally admitted that
motivation,
years
okay,
ago. Like what?
yeah, and the motivation you have for your view is just that I
I
don't
like it.
like, or I
Yes, I
like it
like it.
more. Yeah. Okay. So you also agree that all of the sort of patterns that you see observe within like moral intuition and moral progress, they are all also accounted for under anti-realism, right?
Yes, they're accounted for by infinitely many hypotheses. This is literally the
And
problem of underdetermination. Every single piece of data is always explained by infinitely many hypotheses.
okay. And do you think that these other hypotheses, like anti-realism, explain them equally as well?
No,
Why?
because you don't make predictions or your predictions disagree with mine. Mine have been correct for a while.
Okay. And what sorts of predictions do anti-realists make that have been
You
proven false?
don't make any predictions as far as I know. That's why it's
Uh,
not as good.
we don't need to make predictions around the negative. Like we're just
No, your
look. We're
hypothesis entails conclusions like that. The
yeah,
fact that we would not expect a convergence of morality of all living things in the universe. Under anti-realism, that would be unexpected. I think
yeah,
it's expected.
and
I think it's more likely that this is going to be the case. So I think that your data is probably wrong. Your model is probably wrong because you have
okay. And what's the argument for it being more likely?
the current trends and patterns that we see in all living creatures.
Wait, so to be clear, the evidence for every single living creature converging towards a specific moral view is because some living creatures converge towards like a specific view or
All
converge towards a
evidence we have of all creatures converges on this thing. So like elephants, dolphins, chimpanzees,
elephants and
capuchin
dolphins. Wait,
monkeys.
elephants and dolphins.
Yes.
Elephants and dolphins converge on involuntary impositions of well-being immoral.
Yes.
Do you have proof of that, or is it
Yes,
just another
there's tons of moral studies on lots of different social mammals. Like this is a very common thing. Crows as well, not mammals.
crows? Really?
Yes,
Do you have any
there's
evidence
tons.
for it?
Yes,
Okay, yeah,
Google
yeah.
the
Please,
moral
please
studies
send me
on
the
other
yeah,
animals. Yes.
yeah, okay. And to be clear, you think that the moral studies are going to show me that involuntary impositions of will are immoral?
Yes. So like one of
Or
the studies
like
was
that's
the
what you're
one
trying
by
to say?
Capuchin monkeys where they would give them either grapes
Mhm.
or like celery or something, and they would have them do a task together where they both have to do the task, and they would give grapes to only one of the Capuchin monkeys, and they'd give like lettuce to the other one, and then the one that got the
Yeah,
monkeys would not eat
yeah,
the grapes because it was unfair until there was an equal share of grapes to both sides or something along those lines. Yes.
yeah. That doesn't prove that they're trending towards involuntary impositions
That
of will
literally is. That
being
is a
immoral.
trend because when they are given an abundance of resources, more power, and have the opportunity of fairness, less imposition of will on the monkey that doesn't get the grapes, they
But you think you're
voluntarily
imposing your will
choose.
on someone if you don't
What?
help them?
What?
You said you said the opposite in your other debate. You agree that if I'm not doing any action to another agent, then I'm not imposing my will on them, right?
What does this? So my example was there's two Capuchin monkeys. They both want
Why?
grapes.
Okay,
They
you're not
both want
answering my
grapes. One is not
uh-huh.
given grapes. That is an imposition on the monkey. So the
Why?
experimenter is
Uh,
not giving grapes to the other monkey,
Wait, what do you think an imposition is?
stopping someone from doing something they want.
Stop. Wait, how am I stopping someone from doing something they want if I don't
Like if I
willingly
don't
share
give
my will?
one grapes, that's unfair. Yes.
Okay, wait. So you agree that okay, you agree that
What?
if I
How is
stop. Wait,
this even a
wait,
conversation?
you
Yes,
agree.
the
Wait, you
experimenter
agree.
is imposing on the will of the monkey who wants the grapes by not giving them grapes. If the monkey did work expecting grapes and you don't pay it with grapes, yes, that's an imposition on the monkey's will. Yes. Like
Agree. Okay,
what
to be clear, you
what
also agree now that you also agree now that like stopping rape would be immoral under your view because you're stopping
if you
someone
were
from getting something.
infinitely powerful? What no, if you're infinitely powerful, you just stop it from being able to happen.
No, 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 no. So to be clear, they want it to be able to happen, right? You are stopping them from like being
That's
able to
not an
rape
imposition
someone.
on will. You wanting something from
Oh,
someone else is not your will. So will only applies to
oh, but
yourself and your
okay,
property.
but
So if you want
okay.
something to happen to someone else, that isn't your will being imposed upon.
No, no, no. Okay, and to be clear, you want something, and to be in the example you gave me, you want something from someone else in the sense that they want food from somebody or they want someone else to feed them, right? So you agree that that wouldn't be an imposition of like
Yes, it
there
literally
wouldn't
is
be
an
an imposition of
imposition
love,
because
right?
the experimenters made the pattern that if you do this work, you will get grapes. That's a payment.
Yeah,
That's a contract. If you do this
It's
work, you
consensual.
will get grapes. And that was a
yeah, but
consensual agreed upon contract by the chimpanzees. And if the other person doesn't
okay.
hold up the end of their contract, though it's a violation of the imposition of the monkey because they agreed to the contract. Yes, this is an imposition. This is not even hard. This is like basic
Wait, so to be
stuff.
clear, to be clear, like so you
Next.
We've got
Well,
Alien.
those were some big circles. Yeah. Hello, Alien. Welcome.
Hey,
Thank you for
hey.
joining us. How are you today?
Hey, how you doing?
Great. What have you got for us?
Yeah, I just got a question. I'm very interested to hear the perspective of people who are I would assume you guys are atheists.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is you guys' perspective, opinion on psychic abilities?
That is incidental to being an atheist. An atheist just doesn't believe in any deities, gods or goddesses. The psychic stuff, I know some atheists who believe that psychic stuff is real, like mind reading, telekinesis, stuff like that. Most atheists I know don't believe that stuff. That would probably be more in the realm of skepticism that addresses the counters to those kinds of things. However, you're in luck because most atheists seem to be skeptics or trying to be proper skeptics.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
psychic phenomenon. They don't exist. It's all fake. It's all imagination.
I once thought that I could control the TV with my mind on Tuesdays, but it turned out I was wrong.
Well, those must have been fun experiments.
All right. So why is it that you guys think in that way?
Because every time it's been tested, it has failed. There has been an abundance of tests on parapsychology and parapsychic abilities, and they've all failed abundantly. There is like they succeed at the same rate as random chance or worse. So if you're just guessing random numbers, you get them right sometimes. And the same thing happens with parapsychology. You have a desire, and sometimes that desire matches where the wind blows and it happens. But the rate that it occurs is equal to the rate of people random guessing. Therefore, there's no reason to believe that parapsychology is real and not just people making stuff up.
And what are those studies from?
Well, there's a bunch done by the government. The U.S. did an entire branch of the government based on doing parapsychology research to try and monitor the Russians. All failed. There was a bunch of research done by James Randi and other parapsychology research. James Randi offered a $1 million prize to anybody who could demonstrate parapsychic abilities. All failed. There's been a number of studies. There's a journal of parapsychology where they try to demonstrate these things. All failed. There was a bunch of studies done by a guy who wrote a book, a Christian guy who wrote a book about near-death experiences, about people seeing red shoes in other buildings and serial numbers on top of medical equipment. He found every single example he could in a 500-page document. All of the best examples went through in scientific setting and were discovered to be false. So every single area where these have been tested, they've all been proven false. And there's been an abundance of testing by the government, by independent agencies, by people who believe in parapsychology, and they all fail.
Now, it hasn't helped that there have been some plumbers who've gone on and done TV shows where they search for ghosts in people's houses. It turns out that they know full well why those noises occur, and they're just capitalizing on it.
Alien, I can give you an example with a ridiculous amount of documentation. So CIA Reading Room has, or type in Project Stargate, it has all the documents from Project Stargate, or that's what it is on there, right? I think it's Project Stargate on there. Anyways, just read through that, right? You will understand it's pretty much nonsense. All the internal memos were like, hey, we got to cancel this. This is a waste of money. The accuracy is almost indistinguishable from chance, right? Stuff like that.
In the Stargate, the CIA project that's been done, correct? I've read a little bit about that. That's why I wanted to ask the question.
When people ask me about it, I reference Project Stargate as good evidence against it, right? Because there's a lot of information in there about it, and all the government memos where the government is spending money on ridiculous amounts of money on weapons over the years, they don't see this as a weapon or usable for anything like that.
Well, in some of the things in some of the accounts, and when it came to Project Stargate, from what I've read and such, it seems to be that there was even certain times, well, a lot of the times they got it right, and a lot of times they didn't get it right.
Would that be like 50-50?
No, I would
50-50.
actually say look at the internal memos of Project Stargate and actually read through there. You obviously haven't read through there. You probably read some, I don't even know what you read in there, right? I never read anything like that.
Well, there was one example where one of the psychic person was able to make a prediction about Saturn having rings before they had any photographic evidence of Saturn's having rings, which I know in itself is not a credible amount, but that's one of the things that I've read. So, if let's say
more
what would
Project Stargate.
okay, so
I think you will be very convinced in the opposite direction if you read through the rest of Project Stargate documents on there.
okay, so what will be what in you guys' opinion? What would be the most best way for you to believe in psychic abilities? Let's say in a hypothetical situation, what will be what would you need for you to believe in that?
Sufficient evidence that it actually works, basically.
What kind of evidence?
Well, if somebody claims to have telekinesis, we want to be able to take them to an environment that they're not familiar with and have them perform on an object that is outside of their physical reach and be able to demonstrate that they can make this stuff happen and make it work.
Yeah, if someone claimed such an ability, it would be very easy for them to demonstrate to all of us.
I think the telekinesis in itself, manipulating the physical reality, we can all agree that it is far-fetched. But let's say, how about the most simplest one, which is the most famous one, will be mind reading.
Migrating? Sorry, people migrate. That's a fact. That's
people
not. There's nothing psychic or
He
special
said
about
mind
that.
reading, Richard.
Mind reading.
Randall, one of those
I heard
days.
migrating. I'm sorry, mind reading.
No, mind reading, not migrating. No.
So mind reading.
Mental telepathy. Yeah.
So these people are generally people that are like experts in deception and perception, right? And so they're like looking at physical cues that's going on. They're they know the right questions to ask to have you guide them into what you want. From my understanding, it's just maybe not all psychics are like that, right? But
there is a combination.
It's all nonsense.
There's a combination of something called cold reading and asking leading questions and all kinds of things like that. To test that properly, you could have somebody in the next room, and the psychic mind reader could not know who they are or anything about them. And it'd be handled in a double-blind procedure so that the people are telling, okay, they're in the next room on the other side of that wall. There's only one person in the room, the same size as this room. Tell us what number they're thinking of in their head. It's going to be somewhere between 1 and 1,000 if they consistently get that right with multiple instances. And the person looking at a piece of paper is thinking about that number on that piece of paper. And make it real easy. These people, I can guarantee you, are not going to get that right unless they're making lucky guesses. That's it. They're not going to be able to reproduce it reliably.
In fact, if I could piggyback off what they were, both Randolph and Taco were saying, cold reading really is just trying to pick up cues and trying to say that, well, they look this old. I bet this amount of relatives have died. I bet if I take a guess over here, there's a 50% chance that I'm going to be right. And then there's actually hot reading, where they actually have sometimes had audiences take surveys, and then they hand these surveys to the producer, and then the producer shuffles through them, and then through equipment, they're being fed information about very specific audience members to make it seem like they can read minds. And so there are ways you can make double-blind studies in order to eliminate this. And if someone would love to come forward and truly show that they can read minds, we would love to know about it.
James Randi even had, I think, some people come up and try to challenge this and failed. But yeah, when you're talking about equipment, an example of the equipment would be a small receiver in their ear that is somebody else is talking into a microphone and it's reproduced in their ear that the audience has no idea it's in the presenter's ear and stuff like that.
Good. Let's say, for example, you were to sit with a medium, which that will be a mind reader. If they were able to consistently point out very specific things, even things that are unknown, things that you only share with close people, things that are a little bit unusual for this person to know in a consistent manner, would you say that this in itself would be good enough for you to maybe shift your perspective on it?
No, because I'd have to sit with them, and they would be able to look at me and read me in different ways, not just purely my mind. They would have to be in a separate room. It'd have to be double blind. They'd have to not know who I am. I wouldn't need to know who they are either. It wouldn't matter. And they'd have to be able to say, this is what's in my mind, or this is something I generally think about, and that's not something that most humans generally think about, that sort of thing.
Good thing. So I can understand that in that level. How about in both settings? Let's say, for example, you were to sit in front of this person, they were to make the same thing, the same technique. But if when I'm talking about specific things, I'm not talking about just saying, "Oh, you like
No,
apples."
hang on. The problem here is that we need to sit with them, and we need to interact with them. If they're going to prove that they can read minds, then they need to be able to do that without actually sitting with the subject. They need to be able to read minds, period, without any other kind of interaction. We want to be able to isolate these things and be able to demonstrate consistently, repeatedly, that it works, and not just with one person. We want them to do this with multiple people again and again and again, because there's always that possibility that maybe they figured out who one of the people is. Hopefully they don't figure out who the others are. We need to see consistently that they can do this again and again and again, and do it with ease, or do it with whatever conditions they say they need. Like if they need to drink a glass of warm water at a specific temperature before they can read the mind, fine, give them that. But again, it has nothing to do with the person whose mind is being read.
A higher rate
when it
than
comes
chance. Has to be a higher rate than chance.
And what kind
Absolutely.
and what kind of guesses does it have to be completely acceptable for you? Like we can,
Guesses?
yeah.
Sorry,
What kind of guess?
Sorry, if they're reading a mind, it's not guessing. They're actually reading the mind. They have.
Oh, I'm using the wrong wording here.
Okay. Attempts.
Excuse me. I haven't slept in a while.
Call it an attempt.
An attempt, yeah. So let's say, for example, like motherfucker, my mind is not working. So does it have to be very specific, including time, dates, how the events happen, such things like that? For
I
you
don't know.
to
They
be
can just. I can be holding if I'm the subject in the other room, I could be holding a piece of paper has the number 42 on it, and they're told to tell me what number I'm thinking of between 1 and 1,000, and my job is to sit there and focus on that number and think about that number over and over again. And this should make it easier for them to read my mind if I'm really concentrating on this number. It's mostly what's in my head. So I would expect that for them, however long, if they say it only takes 10 seconds to read a person's mind, okay, after 10 seconds, they better have that number 42. If they are not sure, or they're guessing a number or coming up with some kind of excuse or something, then they failed.
I would say that it depends. The experiment, the level of specificity of the experiment would change how likely it is to happen by chance. So the more specific it is, the less times you have to do it, because the more specific it is, the less likely it is to happen by chance. But you're still going to have to do it like 10 times in a row and get it right more times than you get it wrong.
Reproducibility, indeed. Yeah.
reproducibility. So if I'm understanding this correctly, if let's say if he were to cite and read what's deep within you, 10 specific events, well detailed, said, it would not work if I'm hearing this correctly?
No, that'd be great. That'd be great evidence. So like, yeah, if you could read my mind 10 times in a row about whatever I was thinking about, that would be great evidence.
And another interesting twist that could be done on such a test is they could take one of the previous subjects and put them back in the room and see if the reading is the same.
Okay. Does it have to be like spontaneously what's in your mind, or could it be simply mentioning things that has happened within your past that nobody knows?
That depends on what
That
the psychic
would not
their
work.
ability is.
So the past things would not work for a number of reasons. One is going to be that if you just like look up my history, my social media data, you could find a bunch of very specific events about my past that happened and recite them just because you looked up my past. Or you could find people I know or met me and they could tell you events about my life and you could record them that way. So it has to be something novel, something we wouldn't be able to expect under just normal circumstances. So like you could predict, I could predict probably about 1,000 things that happened in your life because they happen in everybody's life and be right about it. So one of the things is like the people will say they'll like speak to dead loved ones like I'm getting an R. Anybody in the room have a relative with a dead relative with an R? And they can just make these broad generalizations about humans in general and
That's
they
called cold
seem
reading.
very specific. Yes, cold reading. And they seem very specific and very correct. And you can guess lots of things that happen to people's lives by doing cold reading because you use generic kinds of labels that apply to lots of people and then get them more specific over time by using other kinds of generic labels. And that makes it seem like you're doing something specific when you're not. As Randall mentioned, this is called cold reading. It's very obvious. And so, no, it can't be just like past events that happened to me.
Now that's with interaction. Now, if it's a double blind scenario, like I described earlier, where there's a wall between you and your subject. Let's say you're the psychic and your subject's on the other side of that wall. You don't know who they are. You know nothing about them, and you're claiming that you're able to talk about what happened to them 5 years ago. Then you should be able to do that, and that may be considered reasonable. I would think in that circumstance. I think what Tom Jump's thinking about, you've got a whole audience there.
Well, no, even in that case, Randolph, because like that person could have talked to somebody who knew you, and so they know facts about your past that you just wouldn't expect them
then
to
it's
know.
not double blind. Yeah.
Well, that's why double blind studies, you don't know if it's double blind if you're asking someone if they know something about your life, because they might know something about your life, or they might be able to guess generalities. Like I can guess you were probably married in the like about, let's say about 30 years ago, you had a wedding and it was she had a white dress. Her family was
But
there.
that's interaction. There's an interaction there. Yeah, the test that I was suggesting is that the psychic can basically read this person who's on the other wall without interacting with them and be able to say this and this and this about them. Then you bring another person, they're going to have different things. These are very specific things. That's kind of what I'm talking about.
Well, the problem is there's generic things that happen to most people that you could still be right about. So even in that case, it can't be generic in that case because it would not.
Correct.
You have a high random chance of getting the generic things correct.
Yeah, like if you're going to say, oh, this person was breathing 5 years ago, that would be extremely generic. But yeah, you want something that's definitely specific, and I guess novel is the word you used as well. So there'd have to be some parameters outlined ahead of time.
Yeah, there was one where they gave pictures to one of the psychics and said, tell me about the lives of the people in these pictures. And they gave him pictures of like famous poets, and then they gave him a childhood picture of the interviewer, and they said that this person had been dead for 50 years. Like, no, it's me. That was me. Oh, it was funny. That was a good one.
Yeah. So the easier one is just predicting a number that's current. Tom Jump is definitely right. Like guessing the past is harder because, or making statements about the past, because there are general things that can be found. But if it's something specific now in the current point of time, like what number are you focused on? What are you thinking about? And this can all be documented. This is a lot easier test to do. So it depends on what the abilities of the psychic are. Like some psychics self-proclaimed psychics will claim pretty vague things about their abilities. And then they say, well, that's out of my purview when they're guessing it wrong. And when they guess it right, they say, yes, that's a demonstration of my ability. So there's sneaky stuff like that going on too. Like a lot of them are charlatans, and that's why a lot of this stuff happens.
I would say the fundamental misunderstanding that could have caused a person to believe they're a psychic genuinely and just to be confused about it.
Right.
Similar
That's why
to
I say a lot. I don't say all. There are some who genuinely.
Yeah. No, I'm sure there are many who are bogus, but I'm saying the basic misunderstanding is called the clustering illusion. And there's a variety of different family or sort of subspecies of the clustering illusion. But the basic idea is that if you were to just look at a small slice of any random distribution, you could find any kind of pattern in that little slice, like all ones, all zeros, a 1 and a 0 and a 1 and a 0 and a on and off repetitive pattern, etc. And so you get an impression that there is a pattern based on that little slice. But if you zoom out and you look at all the data, there's parts of it that look every which way, and there isn't an overall pattern. That's a more clear picture of what's actually going on. And so when people...
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I talk to people about astrology or any one of these things that they in their own life they've concluded are evidence of some kind of like supernatural pattern or like mystical belief about probability or miracles or whatever, I ask them if they understand what clustering illusions are. 9 times out of 10 they don't. I explain basic statistics to them, and if they actually get it, they're almost always forced to admit that it could be a clustering illusion. And their takeaway is, I just don't want to believe that it's an illusion because it means something to me. And it's like a profoundly relieving feeling when you like expect something bad's going to happen and then it seems like a miracle when it doesn't, and you feel grateful, you feel happy, you feel relieved in a profound way. So the attribution of that to some kind of meaningful, significant purpose or plan or reason, whatever it might be, is a very natural thing to conclude. But if you look at all the situations in your life, not just the one that you noticed because it was very important to you at the time, there's just about the same odds as everybody else of having any given thing happen to any particular person. And there isn't
Yeah.
any rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah, there's also an interesting scenario happened. Psychosomatic effects are a big thing in all of this too. There's a martial art called Ki, where people taking it actually believe that they're using some kind of telekinetic force to knock down their opponents. And they'll have all these people in the Ki class lined up ready to attack them. And then they'll wave their hands in a certain way, getting the technique right, apparently. And then all those people end up falling over. And all those people participating in the class believe they're actually getting knocked over by this because this expectation's been laid in so thickly. And the people practicing, a lot of them actually genuinely believe it. Now, they brought a Ki master, a high degree, been practicing for decades and decades, and he was up against a martial artist. I think he was doing kung fu, and that martial artist is this technique, the telekinetic technique, obviously didn't work, and that Ki martial artist got knocked out. First hit, it's just like the kung fu guy, and then the kung fu guy's coming down really worried about it, along with all the medical staff looking at this poor guy on the ground. So his martial art worked just fine in his circles with the other people who believed it. But as soon as he's outside of that circle, it doesn't work anymore. And this is the big complaint a lot of these parapsychology people have, is that, oh, well, these skeptics, they're just not having faith. They're just not believing. They've got the bad attitude or the wrong attitude. That's why it's failing, because they're poisoning the well, etc. Stuff like that. That's really not the case. Reality is consistent. Reality doesn't lie to us. You can't trick it. It's just the way it is.
I think that's pretty interesting.
I think Ki is spelled Kiai, in case you're interested in looking that up.
Ki, sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, Kiai. So it's Kilo Igloo Alpha Igloo.
All right, bet. One more thing. In itself, have you guys have any personal experience when you have visited people who do readings, tarot readings, astrology readings, or anything like that?
Well, I kind of felt pretty like it's all pretty cringy. If I asked them how it worked when I was a kid, they just didn't have answers for me that were satisfactory. I know somebody who had an experience with somebody who could train to do all that kind of stuff. I knew them many years ago, and it turned out they got raped by the person. So I don't really hold the community that's pushing those ideas in very high regard, because it seems very scammy to me, and then who knows what the alternative motives are of some of those scammers. Most of the time they're just trying to drain people of their money.
Yeah, I've done lots of tarot card readings and stuff. It's the same thing as cold reading. They're just super generic. Astrology and tarot cards have generic labels that they apply to people that apply to most people. So like if you switch the description of what a Libra is versus what a Virgo is, both people will agree that they are both of those things if you just switch the description and the label. They did that in one of the astrology tests, where they just took all the different labels of different people of different astrologies and just switched the names of the month or whatever, the title, and then everyone still agreed that they fit those things, even if they were the completely wrong set of properties that are supposed to be ascribed.
That's been reproduced many, many, many times in many, many different ways with many variations on the experiment consistently.
Now, Alien, if you want to have some fun with this stuff, you can go to a party, bring a horoscope with you, cut off the months, and just have the descriptions themselves. You need to have a way of matching them up later, of course, but you can then pass them out to people and say, here's the list of the randomly sorted horoscope descriptions. Tell me, which one do you think most suits you? And then get them to write their birth date on the back, and then correlate it later and tell them how many are right and how many weren't. Make sure it's not a famous or well-known horoscope. The results, I think, will be quite interesting, because a lot of them will be wrong.
No, I've done similar things like this. I've never done tarot reading, but I've done readings before.
What results did you get with doing a horoscope like one?
No, I'm not. I don't do a horoscope. I don't know anything about astrology or numerology.
Well, the horoscope, they just have, typically in the newspapers, you'll see where they have horoscopes published. They'll have 12 different descriptions of people, and they put one under each of the 12 portioned parts of the horoscope. They don't fall right on the end of the month. There's a kind of weird date overlap, but each one's distinct. So if your birth date falls in this range, then this is the one that applies to you. Like Pisces would apply to me for February 25th. And when I look at those descriptions, I'm thinking, I kind of like that one more than what Pisces gave me. And this one kind of seems to be a better fit. And I've looked at it that way. And then it was my wife who told me about this years ago. Somebody did that at a party, and it's like, wow, that's interesting. And the results were all over the place. People were just completely wrong. Most of them were completely wrong about what they were, to the point where it looked like the ones that were correct were more like correlating with what you'd expect from lucky guesses.
So for me personally, so I've personally have went to tarot readings and mediums and such things like that, and there were some pretty interesting things that I've personally experienced. I do understand the skepticism part, however, because even I, as a personal, I'm personally interested in the occult. There is a lot of these reasonable skepticism that happen, because there is a lot of sham psychics that do happen. One of my experiences, when multiple people who do astrologies and tarot readings, they come and they say, well, this will happen and this will happen. I've been told, I did a quick free one real quick. Somebody that was really interested, that I was referred, he said that in this date in specific, I should go out and have fun. But in itself, I don't really know what he means by that. They tend to not really give out any really form of intention or think. Well, yeah, but that's the thing, karaoke.
They tend
such
to be
things like that. It's very vague.
Yeah, that way they can satisfy more customers. It's a business decision, the way I look at it.
There was things, however, where I would notice some repetition, where they would say some specific things, like this will happen at this age and this will happen at that age. But unfortunately, I do not really remember. I go check out those tarot readings, and I do keep them on notes, and I've been told there's some interesting things, or the things that are not that are pretty interesting. The ones that are really interesting is when it's done online, because you're not really in front of the person, you're just hearing their voice and such. So this is what I'm trying to get at, is see how accurate it could get. When it comes for me personally, I've done readings, but I didn't do any official readings. I've done more practice just to see how it is and how is that. There was few interesting things that came out when I've done it, when I've practiced. But there was some things I do definitely agree that it's a majority is psychoanalysis and cold reading, that I've noticed myself, like, yeah, no, this will not be sufficient enough for it to be considered a psychic reading.
Good for you. You mentioned you used the term reasonable skeptic before. Or reasonable skepticism. And I just point out that skepticism isn't about being reasonable. It's about accuracy and figuring out what you're trying to determine what is accurate and what's not accurate. That's it. It's impartial.
Okay, gotcha. So if let's say, for example, I were to continue doing this study, doing this research, and doing all this stuff, what are the things that you guys would like to see, like to hear, and would like to be done? Because I'm genuine about it. I got a lot of fucking free time for this shit, and I just like exploring.
Winning lottery numbers.
Winning lottery numbers.
Yeah.
That is something that have been interesting because a lot of people have been talking about how billionaires use astrology, even though that's a fake quote.
Well, they definitely do, but they're not billionaires because they use astrology.
Mm.
They use astrology because that's
they
where all the
sell
cute girls
astrology.
are.
That's why they're rich. Yeah.
But
You want to do like meaningful experiments and not just waste your time fooling yourself, then you need to study statistics and you need to study experiment design and research methodology, which is designed to control for error. In many, many, many cases, there are apparently novel results or surprising results, which turn out to be a very embarrassing research methodology mistake where the researchers have to retract the paper. These are researchers who are trained in their field, who are often well-meaning and have, in many cases, millions of dollars of funding, and they still screw up and give themselves false positives all the time because they fail to control in some important way. And then someone else has to point out their mistake after everyone takes a good look at it, which is why we have peer review. This is why we have things like reproducibility as a very highly prized test before we take seriously any majorly shocking result, as we do peer review where someone else examines the research, and then reproducibility where someone else has to be able to do the same experiment, assuming that they follow all these same instructions, that there's not some flaw in the way that the study was set up that doesn't reproduce when other people try to do it. So study science. You can do amazing, like citizen science if you actually research it, much the same way that you can do your own legal research, you can do your own medical research, and in many cases you can discover things that your doctor missed or that your lawyer failed to pay attention to. So citizen science is a thing, but you have to really study the methodology of whatever kind of experiment you're doing and look at all the mistakes that other people making similar mistakes in the same field have previously made before you start your own experiments.
Okay,
I would
so you
I would
says
suggest two things. One is
Mhm.
the Richard Dawkins documentary, the TV show, The Enemies of Reason. I don't like reading. Documentaries work better. So the documentaries on parapsychology from the skeptic perspective are really good. And then you can also look into the only journal of parapsychology. There's an actual academic peer-reviewed journal of parapsychology where you can find examples of people who think it works and what they think the best examples are, and compare those to like the documentaries on the skeptics to see which you think is the better explanation of the data.
Okay, interesting. IX, just real quick. You said study statistics and then
Research methodology and the ways that
Res-
people make mistakes and have to retract things, right? So in a field like
particularly scientific method research methodology.
yeah,
so,
but it differs for every domain and every discipline and every type of experiment. So in the case of parapsychology, there's certain things that they try to do, control for it, and so on. But you generally don't want to just start with people who already have like a built-in confirmation bias from the get-go.
Mm.
Those people are not going to be able to do objective research if they go into it trying to prove the truth is out there, kind of X-Files style, right?
Mhm.
But if you look at all of the studies that get retracted and all the mistakes that have been made, it'll give you a little bit of epistemic humility into how hard it is to get this stuff right. And it'll
Mhm.
give you a healthy skepticism. When people say, oh, look at this amazing thing, this person has this story where they knew a thing and they told us something and then it happened. And then you look at all of the attempts to do anything like that and with any consistency, with any reproducibility failing, all the reasons why the apparent positives were tainted because of like data contamination or like selection bias or all sorts of things like that. And you realize, oh, wow, most of the people who think they have positive results are just fucking up without realizing it.
Mhm. Okay.
And
If I
they're
were to
honest, well-meaning people. They just don't realize what their mistakes are because it's very hard to control all for the mistakes.
Yeah,
It's a people problem, and peer review does make up for most of that, if not all.
Mhm. Are you guys? Yeah.
Oh, Alien, I just wanted to. I had someone saying that, are you aware there is actually $1 million reward for anyone that can demonstrate psychic abilities under laboratory conditions?
I mean, James Randi's challenge.
Who said that?
James Randi.
This is the third time now that we've had James Randi's name come up here. Maybe fourth.
He's a
pretty good. He's
was
doing
is a rock star.
Amy's talking to you.
James Randi. Who is James Randi?
So his last name is spelled Randi, and he's originally a magician who was dissatisfied with seeing scam artists fooling scientific researchers on paranormal abilities, like psychic abilities and things like telekinesis. So he joined up with the scientists to help them improve their research methods so that they aren't fooled by these things, by telling them how these tricks are done and how these illusions are performed. And then after that, they were able to get the consistent results.
He's also a terrific magician. I've actually done a magic trick with him in person. It was pretty fun.
In person? Wow, that's an honor.
Awesome.
That's pretty cool. Well, he's dead. That's unfortunate.
He's passed away, yeah.
Is it still up for offer?
I think the organization is still there. So if somebody wants to, but what's going to happen for that is there's a bunch of conditions that you have to agree to before you can do that. So they have it all laid out contractually beforehand. It's not like Deepak Chopra's counter to that, where he'll give $1 million reward to atheists who can prove atheism or whatever, and he doesn't get into all these, and it's up to him to decide. He never gives it out. But James Randi's on the up and up. They did everything formally and properly with the right legal things set up. So there's a number of people who just refuse to go on James Randi's show because they did not like those conditions. But the conditions are all very well justified under science and all these different things that need to be done properly to make sure that this is actually what you're testing for.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. No, I mean, I've heard about it, but I just ignored it because back then I was an atheist. But now that you brought it up, I mean, that's pretty interesting. So yeah, I am aware of this $1 million.
Now you'll probably find in the community, the paranormal communities, and all these psychics and whatnot, that some of them get into healing, faith healing, and things like that.
Those things, yeah.
So for that, to get educated on that area, I highly recommend quackwatch.org. Quack like a duck. Quackwatch.org. They cite their research. It's done very well, and they debunk all this nonsense. And they do it thoroughly, and they do it with excellence.
Quackwatch.org.
Yeah, it's a website. It's done by a bunch of PhDs.
Yeah, that's interesting. So if I have a story, if you guys are willing to listen, about this one experiment that I've done. And I would like to hear criticism about it. Is that cool
if
with
you
you
need
guys?
just 5 minutes for it, sure, go for it.
5 minutes, no problem. Okay, so there was a time where I've done an experiment with a person who was as well interested in the same thing as me, but as well more scientifically into it as well. So it was for me the perfect system empowerment to have. Somebody was grounded in tune with reality and honest. This is, mind you, done over the internet. So it was, this one as well was pretty much more interesting as well, since we weren't there face to face as such. So a lot of the times what we would do is that she was more well versed into these things. So the first thing that we have done is attempting to guess what we're thinking within our mind, of what we're trying to touch, which body parts we're thinking about between us and such things like that. So there's been multiple times where we have guessed it right, but there's been, of course, many times where you have gotten wrong. What's pretty interesting, however, is that the amount of times that we have gotten right, it's like, okay, that's pretty interesting, but it can be, again, like random chances. Like I said, the amount of times that we have gotten wrong. Then the more we did it, the more things has gotten pretty interesting. Then there was this. Then there was the remote.
Sorry to interject, but I mean, by more interesting, as you did more and more of it, do you mean that your accuracy was going up? Because
the accuracy was going up, yes.
So that's indicating familiarity, perhaps, and that's why you need to change subjects and have the double blind thing going. But carry on.
Yeah, the accuracy was getting more and more accurate, which is the interesting part. Then second, and there was the whole remote viewing thing, which is interesting because I just spontaneously thought about it. I'd never heard about it. I didn't know about it at all. I just say, hey, Because in occult literature, energy exists, energy is this, spirit that. If I were to be remote viewing, then there should be, then you should feel it to some certain extent. Is what we've talked and what we theorized about, based on occult literature. I asked her to tell me where I was within in her bedroom, and she guessed it once, and she guessed it wrong multiple times. So, in itself, is say, well, we're going to simply conclude this is simply lack of training, or it could be simply that there's been a coincidence. That has been pretty interesting, however, to see that. There's been more like of these accurate predictors going on, but then again we can also make the argument that because we have gotten to know each other, we have gotten to know certain patterns or behaviors, but at the same time we weren't there face to face, and a lot of the times it hasn't been done with webcam, we've been doing it on audio.
Do you know what
Then
competitive rock paper scissors is?
No, but just real quick. And then the third one is, this one was a pretty interesting one in itself. This is a thing where I don't know what the word for the title is, but this is how can I explain it? I mean, I think it's pretty cool. And this one was pretty interesting, and this one was the most accurate out of all of the experiments. We would sit down, and we will both go into a meditate and go into a state of flow. And there's the things that we can do within our conscious mind is just create a form of room, a temple, and this is what's according to her. So basically, I just imagine quickly just a room and such things like that. And then I would see her enter it, and I would see her do all of these actions and such. I would then repeat, and I would tell her exactly all of the movement, word by word. She confirmed everything to be exactly accurate, 100%. And this is one of the things that just caught me a little bit off guard. That's basically it. So I'm not saying whether I believe it or not. I just found it to be the last one to be the most interesting because it was the most accurate one and kind of like new to me. So, new to me. So I just definitely would like to hear what you guys have
People
to say
play
about
rock
that.
paper scissors competitively using exactly what was described, which is once they see how a person behaves, they start to build up like a predictive model in their brain where they can intuitively predict the likelihood of the other person doing rock, paper, or scissors with like a greater than average success rate because they've observed how the person behaves. They also have assumptions based on how most people behave. And so a competitive rock, paper, scissors player who does it a lot can beat people at rock, paper, scissors more than the average amount of the time. The bottom line is that's what the brain does. It detects patterns, even ones that are not there, that it imagines. And so it tries to predict things slightly better than you would expect it to be able to predict on average if it were totally random. The brain is very good at that. It is not a psychic phenomenon. It's literally just what neural networks do. If you repeatedly have some set of stimuli in a time series and you expose neurons to them, the neurons eventually become predictive of the time series stimuli and then are able to predict it before it happens in a way which allows them to recognize and even expect it before it occurs. That's what your brain does. It's not psychic phenomena.
Is this due to the fact that the eyes was? Is it due to the fact that the person was able to observe the person in
In any form,
face to face?
if you observe something,
Okay.
if there is a system behind it that has some mechanism to it, your brain can construct a prediction of whatever the next thing it will do is, even if it doesn't know anything about what's causing it. Your brain is detecting the pattern without knowledge of the causal structure of the pattern. So you don't need to like know how something works to predict it mentally. You just need to observe its behavior for any period of time.
And you don't need to hear or see the person at all. So it's like poker online. If you're playing someone who's playing poker, you can get a pattern of what they do based off of how much they bet or when they bet or how long they take to bet. Even if you don't look at them, you never speak to them, you can still gauge their patterns based off of just how often you see their patterns.
And the mathematical concept behind this is called machine learning. It's just a statistical method where you take a given data set and you form an approximate curve fit to the data, which is like the closest you can guess to what it will be in the future. And you can do this with literally any type of data. You can do it with pure math without a human brain. The reason that it works is similar to the way that the brain is doing it mathematically with neurons. There's nothing special about the ability to predict things slightly better than average. It's not evidence of psychic phenomena.
Interesting, yeah. How about for the last one that I talked about? What do you guys think about that one?
So a series of actions are all going to logically follow one from the next. So if you guess like how a story begins, like a person walks into a room, it's very natural to guess a series or sequence of actions, which makes sense and flow logically from one to the next. Also, your sample size is 1. In other words,
Yeah.
it's not statistically significant. So if you had some truly random or like unpredictable data set, you could predict it with a large enough sample size, that might be interesting. But once again, it can still just be an example of you forming a model that's a predictive model with your neural structure.
But in itself, she has confirmed that everything has been quite accurate to what she has been doing on her end. So
You're
are
just
you
predicting like typical things people do on a typical basis, and you're typically going to be right about such predictions. Like I predict you had breakfast this morning, right? Is that like difficult?
Yeah. No, I understand where you're coming from. But what I'm basically trying to get at right here is if I were these predictive things, of course, but if I'm talking about if somebody were to, let's say, come into my mind in this model that I made, a room, and I were to just simply describe that this phenomenon, the actions that she has done, and such things like that, regardless of how generic is, the point is to talk about and suggest that these actions are 100% accurate to what her intention is while she was doing it, the actions on her part.
Yeah. So
Not sure if
first
I'm
of all,
wording
you're
this
you're
correctly.
doing it with a person you know very well. Take this into account using just mathematical methods. Facebook figured out that it was either Facebook or Amazon, I forget. Their psychometric model figured out that a woman was pregnant before she even knew it herself, and started showing her advertisements for pregnancy-related products,
I
which
believe that
got
was
her.
Amazon. Yeah.
Yeah. So they figured out that she was pregnant before she did, because she was doing things and buying things and looking at stuff that was like typical of people that are pregnant. And this actually was a lawsuit because essentially is in this case like getting her into trouble. So yeah, we're good with math at figuring out how to predict things. The brain does exactly the same type of trick, just using biological wet neurons instead of computer mathematics. It's not psychic.
I'm not talking about predicting. I'm talking about simply observing the act that's going on within the conscious framework.
It's the same thing. It's still kind of predicting. If you want to test it, try to publish it in an academic journal. Like, look at the parapsychology journal and how they try to do things. If you think you've actually discovered a way to demonstrate real parapsychology, try the James Randi challenge. Try to publish it in a journal, and if you succeed, you'll be a millionaire.
But do try to study statistics and machine learning beforehand, so you don't just conclude that you have psychic powers when you're actually just doing something that neurons do mathematically.
And if not, the universe is just cool, even if telekinesis or mind reading isn't true.
Well, the funny thing is that mind reading does exist using the same description that I gave of how neurons approximate a given input. We train a neural network on the fMRI and EEG data from a human being, and then we watch the neurons subsequently, and then we reproduce the words that they're thinking in their brain with about a 70 to 80% accuracy.
And yes, that is absolutely correct. We can know people picking which option they're going to choose before they pick it.
Whole
But
sentences.
that's with technology, and so that's physical, and that is also amazing. And so it could be that there's stuff like that. It just doesn't end up being supernatural.
Boom. That's actually very interesting to have a conversation with people. This is exactly what I've been looking for.
Oh, I'll leave you with this parting thought. James Randi is somewhat famous for telling people that no matter how smart or well-educated you are, you can be deceived. This applies to
100%.
everyone. Yeah, pardon?
100%. Yeah.
Really enjoyed this topic. Thank you for bringing it up. We enjoyed the conversation with you as well.
Appreciate it very much. Everybody have a good day. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, alien.
Well, that was actually a really good topic. Our next person is Fepto.
Oh, God.
Fepto, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Destroying baby slayers. Well, there's no baby slayers here, but what's on your mind, sir?
I was going to kind of pick up where you guys are actually leaving off.
Sure. What's on your mind?
Well, you seem to come to a, and you can stop me and tell me if I'm strawmanning your position in any way, but it seems that you guys have come to a conclusion of how predictive the human mind is. And look, I don't think that people are unpredictive. I wouldn't say that at all, but I would say it's something that is not exactly calculable to the finest degrees. I think if you have like something like such a wide range as 20% chance of being wrong, that is a wide range. And it shows that the human mind is truly not monolithic. It doesn't think one way or the other. There are other underlying things as to the uniqueness of the human mind that cannot be predicted.
You mean with the mind reading having like a 70-80% accuracy rate?
Yeah, I mean 20%. That's actually significant. That means that there's 20%. Well, that means it is not able actually with certainty give you an answer as to what somebody's going to do. That people are not just inputs and outputs.
To be fair, though, the crudeness of the instruments, which is EEG and fMRI, which usually isn't real time, is the primary limiting factor. And every single time you increase the number of EEG, like if you go from 32 to 64 electrodes, the accuracy goes up like, 4 or 5 times. So if you increase the accuracy of the measurements, it's entirely plausible that the inaccuracy goes away.
You're saying it's plausible that inaccuracy disappears?
As you increase the resolution of the instruments used to measure the brain, yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. You're saying it's plausible. I don't think you have any factual evidence to back up your claim.
Well, the evidence is that as you increase the accuracy of the predictions of what the person was thinking go up at like a geometric rate, right? So every time we
increasing the resolution, what does that look like?
So like just with EEGs, for example, there's one electrode in every little sector of your scalp. And so if you have 32 of them versus 64 of them, the accuracy is like 4 times higher with 64 than it is with 32. And if you increase that further, the setups that they use for the very best experiments, they have like 200 or 500 or 1,000 electrodes. And these are just on the surface of your scalp. They're not even invasively inside of the brain. They're just measuring surface brain waves. So as we increase the precision of the measurement, we don't know if there is unpredictability.
In all variables, what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Like why are you missing 20% of the time? Like why do you
we're only using a very small number of measuring electrodes, so the data is very imprecise, and we're able to get
let's just say
extremely high precision even with very imprecise measurement.
Well, let's just say if you took a 1080p square and then all of a sudden you made it a 4K square, does the squareness change? And that's the issue that I'm having here is you're coming to an assumption that you're just not seeing something. I don't think the doctors had that assumption, which is why they are not throwing as many electrodes at it as you're claiming they should to increase accuracy.
What are you talking about? Literally, we build new things with more electrodes to get higher accuracy, and we've been doing that for decades, and that's how we've gotten to the level of accuracy we've gotten to today. So we literally are doing that, and we literally do see as we increase the level of complexity of the machine we're using, we get better data, and that's the trend we've seen in literally every field ever.
So the question of
why would I
indeterminacy.
deny that claim over what he's actually saying?
That's what he's saying. He's
Because
literally just
you
saying
guys,
that as we increase the machine, as we increase the power of the machine, we can
Okay.
read your mind better. That's all he's saying.
yeah, no, you introduce a new variable. You're talking about complexity. He's talking about visually. He's talking about being able to actually
No.
map
He's
out your
talking about
brain.
the electrodes that are reading your brain. The electrodes are the thing that touch your
Yeah.
brain and read the data. So if you have more things that get more data, it gets more accurate predictions. That's all he's saying.
Okay,
More
rather than
complicated machine, more predictions.
Okay, rather than changing around the complexity of not just what's the data that you're actually reading, but changing around the how should I put it, the model in which they come to conclusions based on the data they've received. That's kind of how I was deeming this complexity to increase. But you're literally just you're just saying what he's saying. They're increasing the resolution. So when I brought up the example of, let's just say there's a square and you see it in a 1080p resolution, the squareness doesn't change the minute that you change it to 4K. It's still a square. There's no extra variables. To assume that there are extra variables that you're not seeing is, well, that's what I mean. It's just a conjectural assumption.
Yeah, but it's not
But
a
there's
square.
data.
There's no
Data
square.
is simple, and it supports the conclusion that every time you increase the precision of the measurement, you're able to increase the accuracy of the prediction. That's the data we have, right? So if we have a graph, every time the number of electrodes goes up by 2, the accuracy goes up by 4, then you wouldn't conclude that it's just going to stop doing that because you hit the square or whatever, and there's no further detail.
You think it's just electrodes is the only reason that the accuracy is increasing, or is it just a contributing factor?
Well, the accuracy of the data can be enhanced using a variety of analysis methods like Laplacian transforms, where they essentially do some mathematical cleanup of the data to get even more precise predictions with the same number of electrodes.
Yeah, that's what I
There's
mean.
things
No,
that
that's
can
what I mean.
improve the results without increasing the number of electrodes. You can still improve the results, and they've done that multiple times.
Yeah, but it's not just the electrodes improving.
Who cares about the electrodes?
that's
As
doing
we improve the machine, we can read your
you cared
mind
about
better.
your electrodes.
Like, it doesn't.
The point is that the electrodes are the easiest way to get
True.
more precise data. You can also do cleanup and denoising to get more precise data. You can also do, things that are in the methodological approach that could do better results with the same data. The point is, with the current methodology we have no reason to think that given improvements in the measuring devices and cleanup of the data, that we're going to hit a point where we just can't predict what people think. But the question is, why is this important to you? It sounds like you're concerned about some concept of free will. Is it for theological reasons?
No, it's not. It's not that. It's not that important to me. I'm just saying, no, it's not a concept of free will. And I'm sorry, I'm not a free willist. I'm not a free willy person.
That's
but
fine. I was just wondering
am
why
a
you
person
asked.
who believes that the mind transcends technology to the point where you are unable to actually predict. Like, you can see the data all you want, but is it accurate and accurately representing the data? That's when you come to a conclusion.
What? That was not a coherent
Are you just
sentence.
asking?
No, it had nothing. Okay, so when I made that proposition, it had nothing to do with what you're claiming. It had to do with the philosophical basis of us being able to accurately interpret the meaning of something, of data that comes in, rather than the fact that data exists.
Well, the fun thing is that the interpretation is not being done in like a human understandable way. It's being done by a machine learning model. So they literally they take data of a person's thoughts, and they take the brain data, which is being scanned. They develop a machine learning model which is trained automatically without any human knowing exactly how it works. It's a neural network. It gets shown the data over and over again, and it develops the right tuning to match with what the brain is doing, and what the thoughts are. And that's how they end up with the model that does these super high fidelity predictions, right? So we don't really know how the model works per se. We just know that you can train models to do anything without really knowing how they work.
Yeah, because I mean, generally speaking, humans are somewhat predictable. It's not to say though that humans are monolithic, and I think that's the issue that I'm having with what you're trying to say is that humans are in fact monolithic in nature when they're really not like that.
Can I give an example where they were able to predict? Is they would give people choices between like ice cream flavor, and attached to this machine with the nodes, they were able to accurately predict which flavor they were going to predict.
So
In other words, they knew what ice cream they were going to pick before the person knew it themselves.
human
Yes.
brains are pretty monolithic. There's
Because they
a
knew certain things
there's a
about.
Jennifer Aniston neuron. Like so, yeah. So if you put the same machine on a different brain, it'll get about the same results.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the ice cream goes, I mean, I don't know what data they took in. It probably had to do with what they currently like to eat, not activities they participated in. And based on that, you would be able to know what kind of ice cream somebody would prefer. So, I mean, I'm sorry. That's to me, it's not too extravagant of a prediction.
So it seems like you're saying that you think human brains are sufficiently different that this machine might work for some people, but not other people.
I was saying in generalities, it works. Yeah, I was saying
What
it's not
wouldn't it
monolithic,
work for?
meaning it doesn't work out all the time. That's
What,
why you have 20% to 30% offshoots.
no, we have 20 to 30% offshoots because our technology isn't at a high enough level yet. Once it gets to a high enough level, it'll be like at a 0.0% offshoot.
Isn't that like? I'm sorry, that's like a faith-based assumption.
No, it's a
And also the
technology-based
percentage
assumption.
of it not working is individual words. So it's reproducing sentences that are being spoken aloud in the person's internal dialogue, their own thoughts, and it's getting one or two of the words out of 10 wrong or blank because it doesn't know what the word is. So it's like a transcript of your internal dialogue with some of the words mixed up.
I'm sorry, I don't know what I was supposed to take away from that. I'm not saying you're dumb. I
saying
just don't
it's
know
not
what I
like
was
there are
supposed to take away
people that
from
are
that.
immune to it. There's not like people that it can't predict. It's not like it fails 100% on a person 20% of
I'm
the time.
not
It's that
saying that.
one or two of
No,
the
no, no,
words out
no.
of 10 aren't
I'm not
correctly.
even saying that.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's pretty accurate. Yeah, I'm saying it's pretty accurate, but it's not able to predict in a monolith because people are not a monolith.
What does that mean?
Meaning that people do not act monolithically. They're not going to act in lockstep down the line. Every attribute, like let's just say this: you have two kids that grow up in a poor home, the same poor home. They were treated the same exact way.
Do
They
you
have
mean
the same exact
inconsistent?
food, same exact
You mean,
clothing.
are you just trying to say that
They
people are
they
inconsistent?
they can and have people have turned out with different results.
Yeah.
Now, let's just say they're identical twins as well. Let's just even improvise that because you could say it's pretty unequal input because I didn't have a fair shot at the NBA because I didn't have the genetics of Michael Jordan. So let's take two twins who have the same genetics, the same parents, the same lifestyle. They can have contrasting results, same interactions with the same people. They can end up being completely different people.
It'll
we're all
still
in agreement.
it'll
They
still be
decided
able to
to
read
make.
their mind. It'll read both of their minds just as well.
We're all in agreement that people can start out the same and end up different. And we're all in agreement that a person could think one thing one day and a totally different thing the next day, right? The point is that it's
Doesn't
trained.
that get rid of predictive models?
No.
The
No,
predictive
because
model,
what it's trained
it
on
doesn't,
is the
it
words.
doesn't predict that somebody's going to think the opposite thing that they thought the day before.
The
No.
point
It's
is
supposed to
not that
predict the
it's not
same.
predicting what you're going to think. It's reading the words as you think them from your brain, right? So when a person says, I like vanilla, it will say, I blank vanilla, or I happy vanilla, or me happy vanilla, right? Like it might read it slightly wrong, but it's correct.
I don't have an issue. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I know that Well, I don't know if they type them out on. They're able to see words now, like actually see the words. Is that what you guys are actually saying?
Yes.
So what happens first is a person
Okay.
looks
Yeah,
at a bunch
I
of
don't have
text,
an issue with that.
and while they look at the text, it reads their brain and their eyes at the same time. So it knows what words they're looking at, when they think, which neurons fire up at the same time. Takes that data, it correlates it, and then it knows a very high precision what a person is thinking without looking at any
Yeah.
word. Yeah.
So your objection is the one where we can predict what you're going to decide before they decide it, and you think that there's a limit to that.
Oh, I do think there's a limit.
It could be the case. We just don't know. But as the accuracy increases with the instrumentation and methodology, we don't see a reason for there to be a limit.
Why do you think there's going to be a
Well,
limit?
generally, I think it's a assumption, sort of. I mean, like, there's probably data out there that would support my claim that people have just. I mean, like you're even bringing it up. They're breaking the models. And it's not just with the mind reading. It happens to do with algorithms tracking how they may act every single day, and looking at their search results. People can still act outside of the algorithms that are set up in place to advertise to them.
The algorithm is your brain. So it's looking at your brain chemistry, your brain neurology, and saying, based off of this, we know what you're going to do. You can't violate your brain chemistry. That programming is you.
I think
Okay,
you're
so-
generalizing
but
crypto.
you're-
You're assuming we're making like a global claim that like algorithms are going to be able to just be trained once and then predict everything you're going to do for all
I
time.
didn't, I didn't say. Okay, that's a.
We're not
that'd
saying
be a
that.
real claim.
What we're
Yeah, no,
saying is
I'm-
that given
well,
a person's brain at any given time, if trained on the state of that person's brain at that time, it's then able to read the thoughts that they are having.
Yeah, make some predictive models.
Right.
I'm not even
And
denying that.
it's doing an interpretive model of what thoughts they're thinking, and it can also do a predictive model of what thought they think they're going to be aware of having before they have it.
Yeah. I thought they think that maybe on some things.
This has been demonstrated. We've already done this. Why do you think there's going to be a limit?
The fact that there's a 20% offshoot or 30% offshoot.
Why do you think that
right
number
there.
isn't going to go down as we gain more
That's just a
technology?
particular experiment that they did with a particular level of precision.
I didn't say anything about the number going down. That's kind of pushing me, or it'd be pigeonholing me, because that's not a position I've ever held.
No, that's our position. Our position that the number is going to continue to go down. The accuracy is going to go up.
No,
the inaccuracy is going to go down.
I see what
Why
you
do you
mean.
think
Yeah.
that is not going to happen?
I didn't say it won't. I didn't say down the line it wouldn't happen, that maybe you'd reach a 10% like offshoot.
And why are you stopping at 10%? No, none of the science says it's going to stop at 10%. Why did you pick 10%? Why not 1% or 0.1%?
Because I do truly believe that human minds are, in fact, unique and advanced enough to not work in a monolithic, algorithmic way.
You don't think that brain chemistry is like a computatable process, like a computer that can be read by another computer to know what you're going to think?
Yeah, I mean, like, well, here's a good example. What's a serial killer who ended up on Netflix? What's his name?
There's a lot of them. Dahmer?
Yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer. Yeah, the famous one.
There's a lot of them. But yeah, go ahead.
Would your algorithms, I mean, do you think the algorithms truly would be able to predict that he would make a profession in Jesus and repent of his sins and his past crimes against other humans?
Yes.
The algorithm, okay.
That's the typical behavior of hopeless people in
you don't
prison
have the
who do
current
very bad
technology.
things that are like pressed with guilt and no other options. Yeah, it's a very common pattern.
Yeah, that's like a 15%
No, I mean, he had
of
a
people.
he has psychopathy. That's not something that's reversible.
What is that?
In most generalities?
He also has
Psychopathy is
incarceration.
something that's
He also
reversible.
has incarceration, right? It's a trend of people that do bad things that are incarcerated. They have nothing to do, and they sit around reading books, and it's very common for them to fall into religiosity.
Also, there's nothing
common?
that.
Yes,
you
it's
think
extremely
it's common?
common.
That
Yes.
people in jail. How many people in jail turn to religion?
It's like
A lot of
15%.
people.
It's a huge number.
That's not common.
A
It's
stereotype.
extremely common.
That doesn't make it common.
Yes, it does. Like the
So
general
so you
public
think 50%
numbers are
is
like
common?
yes, the general percentage numbers of people who change religions is, I think, in the single digits. The percentage in prisons who change religions is extremely high. It is more common. It is one of the most common places to change religions is when you're in prison, because of the level of community you get, because of how close you are. You're more likely to adopt the ideologies of people around you. Like,
And it's a survival tactic because if you're with a large group that's strong,
Really?
will leave you alone.
Here's a fun fact. Okay, what percentage of the population
You
is
think there's
Muslim?
a bunch of big, strong
1%.
Christian groups inside jails?
yes.
What percentage? Just hear me out. The percentage of the prison
No,
population
that's
that
not
is
generally
Muslim.
how it works.
Fipto, listen to me for a second. I'm giving you data. The percentage of the U.S. population that is Muslim is 1%. The percentage of the prison population that is Muslim is 18%. Do you think that it is because people in prison
Kinda
are
racist.
more likely? No, it's just a fact that a lot more
Islam is not a
people
race, but don't pull that
convert
card.
to a religion.
1350, sir.
A lot of people convert to religion while in prison, which they would not otherwise do.
And many who
Yeah, I
were
mean,
in
sorry,
the
are
religion,
you
and
taking
once they're
into
out of
account
prison, many of
who was
them leave
Muslim
that
before then?
religion. And once they're out of prison, they leave that religion. A lot of them do.
Okay, so have you already taken into account that they were not already Muslim before they went in?
Yes.
Yeah, how many?
Your original
1%
question
of the
was
people going in are Muslim. 18% are Muslim after being in there for a long time.
You're taking the whole population. Okay, no, that's not how this works.
your question.
You just gave me the whole population of Muslim stat. Oh, guys, don't defend him. That was
you had a
you all
question.
know.
Will
You all
our
know that he
algorithm,
dirty.
Fipto, will our algorithm be able to
Okay.
predict a conversion of a murderer in prison to a religious belief? Yes, that's an extremely common thing. Yes, that is a very predictable thing.
It will be able to predict.
Yeah, yes, when it's good enough.
So
Yes.
okay, yeah. You would be saying this on the basis of evidence. I'll say you're saying it on the basis of certain evidences, from, let's just say, the outside world of marketing algorithms, marketing bots. Based on marketing bots, you would say it's able to predict each and every individual's religious well, I don't know if you'd go as far to go
yes.
religious affiliation as
Yes,
well.
Here's some data. So
I-
70% of people in one Muslim survey converted to Islam in prison, and only 20% outside of prison.
Well, so I'd go further. I'd say yes. I think the Amazon algorithm that identified the pregnant lady would work on prisoners to be able to predict their conversion before they knew they were going to convert. Yes.
Yeah,
That's
that makes sense.
well, I mean, I do believe that's a blind claim, though, right?
Well, it worked on the pregnant lady. Why wouldn't it work on the prisoners?
Because they're two different people with two different circumstances, and I believe you are making a faith-based claim. It's not based on evidence, isn't it?
Actually, because the prisoners probably don't have money to buy stuff while they're in prison.
Well, no. So that's a very evidence-based claim. So
No, they have some money. They have some money. Don't
the
mock
way
it.
the Amazon algorithm works is that there are trends that people do before they're pregnant, like cravings for certain kinds of foods, which are very common among people who are pregnant. And so if the person doesn't know they're pregnant, but they have certain cravings or tendencies that are
No,
common
they're
among
pregnant at
pregnant
conception.
people. No, like she doesn't know she's pregnant. If she doesn't know she's pregnant.
I know, but because of the fetus, it causes certain things.
Yes, and like there are certain tendencies. So if there are certain
different
tendencies among
hormones are going
prisoners,
off.
like they read certain books, or they spend more time in the library, or they spend more time with certain other prisoners, or talking to certain other prisoners.
Yeah, the guy picked up the Bible. He's going to become a Christian. What a good algorithm.
Yes, that's how the algorithm works, and it works. It's an
he picked up the
accurate algorithm.
Bible.
So yes, that's
sorry.
congratulations. That's how
It's
algorithms work. They're predictive models based off of certain actions that you do. Yes, and it works. Because humans
No, I mean
are
get
pretty
it. I
generic.
get it. If you take something as general as they read the Bible every day, like, I'm sorry. That's
what else
you
is there to do in
taking something
prison?
that's not very. Like
people in
you know how
prison-
you guys have mocked
Hey,
like how
people
the
in prison-
Bible
hey,
made certain
people in
prophecies,
prison,
and you'd mock it.
Fipto. People in
Okay.
prison have a lot of time to sit there and read a Bible all day or read a Quran all day. So of course that's going to happen. And there's a survival tactic too. You're going to join with one of these religious groups so that you don't get beat up by the other prisoners as often or at all, depending how strong the group
Not all
is.
the time. Not all the time.
It doesn't need to be all the time.
In some cases, actually, this would occur with a family friend of mine. Her cousin. She's I don't know if she's if he was put into a Mexican jail or an American jail. But no, he was gang raped because he was a Christian.
Great. What does this have to do with the
That
topic?
happens in all kinds of prisons. Unfortunately, it happens in Canadian prisons too.
Okay, I'm just saying it's
Anyway, maybe you better drop
when
the
you
example.
put up
You
this
brought up an
facade
example of a person in prison
for
converting to
protection.
Christianity, and we gave you data that people convert to religious affiliation while in prison by like a 5-to-1 ratio. But do you have any other questions?
5-to-1 ratio. You're talking about the
The
they went to
answer to
prison.
your question is
15%
yes,
come out
Fipto.
religious.
The algorithms will be
Didn't-
able to predict the conversions of psychopaths. That is an extremely easy
What
thing
about
to
the
predict.
deconversion?
Can I
Yes,
actually
it
just
will
point
predict that.
out
Yes.
that these
Okay.
type of predictions are the type of predictions you would expect from something that we can look into the future with something like science. You were talking about how you make tease maybe about the prophecies within religion, and that's because if they could do any sort of things like this, we would be a little more impressed. But we don't get that. We don't get the type of Old or New Testament miracles that seem to have happened quite frequently just a few hundred or 1,000 years ago.
Well, you didn't see I forget what they call the land. It's been around for like a decade and a half. No, the two cities by the Jordan River that were destroyed by sulfur balls.
Okay,
It wouldn't be
that
a
was a
prophetic.
miracle?
It wouldn't be prophetic. You know, it would be a miracle though, because it wasn't predicting the future when it laid out. When it was laid out.
that would be a great prediction, predicting exactly when two cities would be destroyed with no prior evidence. It's a great prediction. Yes. Didn't happen, but
Yeah.
yes.
What about Jesus when he
Yes, if you predicted he rose from the dead,
the desolation of the temple? You don't think that was a pretty good prediction, that the Jews were kind of in good standing with Rome, and then he said this generation will not pass away until all these things come to be, and one of them happened to be their temple being destroyed. Was that not good enough of a prediction?
well, another one was of his second coming, which didn't happen. So no.
Yeah, no, he said, well, he's saying you'll see the Son of Man coming on the clouds, and the language that he's using is judgment language. So he didn't mean I'm literally coming on the clouds. You'll literally see, like in the Old Testament, where he says Yahweh is coming on the clouds.
So he
You
said a lot
don't
of
literally see
metaphorical
Yahweh
stuff.
coming in on the clouds. It's judgment language that Jesus was using, and it was intentional because they recognized that language. It's the same language Yahweh used when he was pronouncing judgment on the land.
So you're going to cherry pick the ones that did happen and ignore the ones that didn't.
I assume you also take the stars falling from heaven literally when that's judgment language that he's using.
Yeah, the Bible, the people who wrote the Bible were just ignorant and they thought the stars could literally fall. They were just wrong. So, yeah, that was literal.
I mean, you have to remember this book does. No, you're here, but you have to remember this book believes in giants and angels and things, so it's not exactly a science text.
Nor is it a book, right? It's an anthology of different texts written by authors who disagreed with each other.
That's
It's been collectively, systematically theologized into some so-called system. even though the system is not actually compatible with itself, contains numerous inconsistencies. Even in a single text, you have like doublets and triplets of the same story
hold
that
on.
are
You're
inconsistent,
jumping somewhere
or
else.
they give multiple accounts of the same events that are not compatible with each other in a single so-called story that you call a
Oh
book,
yeah,
which is not written by the same author. Not even in a
yeah.
single story is written by
You're
the
you're
same
gonna
author.
run the same line your buddy ran before he converted to a Catholic.
What does that have to do with anything?
Are
He,
you talking
he had
about
a
Xerxes?
whole thing about the
You're talking
resurrection
about
of
Xerxes.
Jesus being inconsistent.
I think
You're
he's talking
talking
about
about Xerxes, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So somebody makes an argument and then
King
they
Xerxes.
convert.
Yeah.
Therefore, that argument is now debunked. Is that your argument?
No, obviously he didn't think that argument was good enough.
So Xerxes wasn't familiar with most of the
So you're
issues
saying
of
that
the
he
Bible
accepted
outside of the canon.
fallacious. Well, I've already walked through why he's actually wrong on that. But he just rejected it, and then I guess now he's starting to see that he's not just going
We don't
to
care.
faceplant
We
into
don't
religion.
care about
Okay.
how or
Okay,
what
then
converted
we'll
Xerxes.
go back to what I was talking about. Jesus' novel prediction of the destruction of the temple.
So a
And the
literary
fact that he was using
character
judgment language, stars
can
were not
make
literally falling from the sky. That's
a
judgment
literary
language. You see it in the Old Testament, where stars falling from the sky? No, they didn't think stars were falling from the sky. Yahweh's using judgment language. Yahweh's not
the,
literally coming in on the cloud. Jesus wasn't even saying that either. It's judgment language. He was saying this temple is going to be destroyed.
the problem with literature making ex eventu vaticinium prophecies is that what these are things that have already happened being justified and explained as though they were predicted and have meaning and purpose within a theological system. We can show
Okay,
numerous examples
isn't that
demonstrating
assuming the
that
church didn't have
the
Matthew
authorship
before the destruction of
and
the
the
temple?
dating of prophecies is often demonstrably ex eventu. The best example is Daniel, right? It's exhaustively established that Daniel's written around like 265. It's a Maccabean rant about Antiochus humiliating the temple by doing Greek style religious practices, which is the abomination that brings desolation. Every single thing about it lines up with someone who's very angry at Antiochus. All the predictions that it makes are not predictions, they're things that happened prior to 265. Everything that it says that
just to
happens
know that
after
the church
265
fathers
didn't happen as it was predicted because it fails as a prophecy. It's not a prophecy.
I'm
It's
letting
written
you
in
know the
three
church fathers
different languages. It's written in
disagree.
3 different languages by 3 totally different literary styles, right? It's in
Okay.
Aramaic, it's in Hebrew, and it's in Greek. All 3 of these texts get combined together and treated like they were written by one person, even though there's no way they're written by the same person. And the only things that it gets right happen prior to the first date that anyone can show that this text existed or that anyone quoted this text in showing knowledge of its existence. So if it only appears after the events that it describes, in what way can you say that it's a prophecy?
You're just saying the oldest manuscript that we have of Jesus, of Matthew 24.
I'm talking about
the earliest
Daniel, the book of Daniel. Did you follow what I just said?
Okay, where are you going with this?
Okay,
Hold
so
on.
Fifto, the point. One second. Let me clarify. One sec, Fifto. So the point was, if the text where the oldest text we have has a written prophecy, and that text is older than when the thing it's prophesying occurred, it's not a prophecy because they could have written that after the fact and just claimed it was a prophecy.
You said that backwards, I think.
No, I don't think so. So
yeah, it's newer than the events that it's describing. That's right.
So if the written document was written after the thing it prophesies, then it wasn't a prophecy because it's post-diction. They wrote it after the thing happened.
You're saying
So
the
they could
Greek
just be.
Septuagint didn't exist.
That's the cases that Ix was listing. He was listing one case, the case that is the oldest that we know was definitely predicted before the events that it was prophesying, which is the book of Daniel. That one is a good example because at least we know that that document was written prior to the event it predicts.
And if you think this is just some kind of anti-religious rant, just go to YouTube, search up the Book of Daniel is a pious forgery. It's a Christian scholar giving a lecture on why it's the case that agrees with all the secular scholars. They're in agreement that there's abundant evidence that the Book of Daniel is not written in 600. It's written around 265 by someone who's angry at Antiochus.
You mean 600 BC, 265 BC, or AD?
BC.
Wait, so it's 265 BC.
I believe so. Yeah, I might have it off by a little bit.
Okay, but Daniel makes claims
About
about
600. Yeah.
no, not about 600 BC. That doesn't even matter.
Oh, you
It
think
makes
it's
claims
evangelical
about
prophecy
the
about
coming
Jesus?
of the
Yeah.
Messiah.
But
Yeah, it makes
you're
claims
wrong.
about the coming
You
of the
just
Messiah. What
don't
his goal
understand that it's
is,
about Antiochus. It's actually
and
about
Jesus,
Antiochus.
Jesus identified what his goal was to establish the very kingdom that Daniel was prophesying about, that he was supposed to establish. It was the kingdom
And
of
this
God.
interpretation was made up by Christians, but it was not believed at the time of Daniel being discussed.
No,
And read.
that is false. That is false. No, Jews believe the Messiah is supposed to bring the rule of God here on earth.
So Jews
That's
had a
what the kingdom
variety
of
of
God
beliefs.
means. It
So
means
you
the rule
actually
of
don't
God.
know what the word Messiah means. Messiah means like a king, right? And so
Yeah, a
beliefs,
savior, king. Yeah, I get
beliefs,
it. But
there's a
there's one
huge
specific
difference
Messiah that Jews
between
recognize.
there's a huge difference between a political king savior and a religious, spiritual, salvific, right? So a majority of Jews believed then, and still believe, that the Messiah is a political savior of the
Yes.
Jewish people, a
Yes.
king, not a
Yes.
salvific
Yeah.
that does something to do with original sin, right? The idea
Yeah,
of the
and hold
Christians
on.
that
So
Jesus saves
so
through
that's
the
a
some
lie. That's a
like
lie. What you're about to say is a
change in
lie
original sin
because you go to
is
Daniel
a
9.
novel
The
idea that
goal of the
was not
Messiah is
believed
to
by
put an
Jews.
end to sin. You're a liar.
The goal of the Messiah was to be a king and a savior for the
Oh
people.
my gosh. You're a liar. No, the goal of the Messiah was also to put a death. Mr.
That's an
Batman alive?
interpretation of particular sects of Messianic Jews and Christians.
Oh. Well, no, I mean I'm just calling him what he is, a liar. He doesn't know all the revelation and he looks to slander Christianity, so he's going to speak ignorantly.
I don't
Part
agree
of
with
the
their
Messiah's
systematic
job is to
theology,
put an end
nor
to
did
sin.
Jews at the time of the writing of the book of
what,
Daniel, because
and he's
Christianity did
supposed
not
and he
exist
is
yet.
supposed to bring
You're
salvation
retroactively
to his
interpreting
people.
a thing that someone wrote
No,
around
it's not just me
265
interpreting. If I
to
showed
be
you word
meaning
for word in
something
Daniel,
about Jesus.
would you shut your mouth if I showed you word for word in Daniel what I'm talking about? No, I mean, like nobody here on your side should be accepting what you're saying. What you're saying is just blatantly false.
But please be nice to everyone. Be nice to the
So
panel.
you're claiming that
It's
all
not
Jews
nice.
had
Be
a
told
single
you're wrong and
interpretation
then continue
of
to
who
lie
the Messiah
through
was
your
supposed
own
to be,
ignorance.
which is not the case. There were dozens of different interpretations, different messianic and apocalyptic cults who believed that
Sure,
different kinds of the
tons
Messiah
of
would
them.
appear. They did
Why would
not
I dispute
all
that?
agree with your interpretation that Jesus was a salvific.
Sure,
Many
not
of them
everybody
believed,
agrees.
Many of them believed that what the Messiah, the king, was supposed to do was to bring political salvation to the people of Israel who had been humiliated by repeated invasions, by having their temple destroyed, and so on.
Yeah,
They wanted a
part of,
political leader,
okay,
and
but
many of them are
here's the
still waiting
issue.
for that political leader to this day.
Yeah, so here's the issue. That political leader already came. And guess what? You see what? The Western world, the Western expansion coming about by the reigns of the Messiah. Oh, yeah, Christ is king, the expansion of Western culture. Oh, you don't like slavery all that much? Like certain forms
This
of
is your
slavery all that much?
retroactive
Oh,
interpretation
look, it's
based
not
on your systematic
retroactive.
theology
It's
to
not
try to explain it
retroactive.
through the lens
Okay,
of
man.
your
Okay.
particular denomination.
But
right?
Yeah, the
Early Jewish
transformation of
messianic
the
cults
world is
had
one
a
of the
huge
points that
variety of different
as to why
interpretations
Jesus is
of what
Messiah for
kind
the
of
Jews.
messianic
It's
prophecy
because
they
he actually
expected.
did transform the world and he brought the Gentiles to Yahweh. That is the goal of the Messiah.
No.
Please let people finish when they're responding to you, and please
He interrupted me.
And please don't tell
Don't-
people
don't-
to shut
don't
their
pull
mouth,
this.
because we've been polite and respectful with you. We expect to be reciprocal.
But it's
You're
okay.
simply not familiar.
Okay, but it's not reciprocal respect when you're corrected. And I even offer, look, if I showed you the evidence, you're just blatantly wrong because he's just lying through his teeth right now. And you guys are just willing to put up with it. I don't know why.
Your unfamiliarity with religious scholarship is not licensed to call people liars because they disagree with what you think a given verse means.
It's what the text says. The text says the Messiah's goal is to put an end to sin, to bring salvation. That is part of it. It's not just you spoke of it like it doesn't say this in the text. It does. Now, what also is supposed to be had is he's supposed to bring the kingdom of God, the rule of God on the earth. And that's exactly what
If
Jesus
you want to
did. The
become
transformation
informed,
of the world. If Jews want to see why Jesus is the Messiah, why are a bunch of Gentiles worshiping Yahweh?
If you want to become informed about the religious scholarly consensus on the Book of Daniel being a pious forgery, I encourage you to do some research. If you want to become informed on the consensus that there was a huge variety of different beliefs about what the Messiah was supposed to be, but that the basic meaning of the word meant king, not necessarily a salvific, and didn't specifically have to do with the idea of a spiritual leader, it had to do with the idea of a political leader in the eyes of most Jews.
I know.
Does
He's
to
supposed
this
to
day.
rule all things. He's
So
the
for some
Son of
reason,
Man who comes on the clouds, who
for some
rules
reason,
all things in heaven and on earth.
people disagree with
I
you.
know this.
Still do.
Flipto, please.
Sure,
Because
people
X
disagree
was
with me,
giving
but
a
dude,
very lovely explanation, but it's going to go around in a circle because there's a very specific reason why Jews aren't Christian. That's because they don't see him as the Messiah. Because Messiah was very specifically a political and not a religious position. It meant someone who was going to, as king, reconquer Jerusalem. And to the Jews, the moment that Jesus died, it meant he was very specifically not the Messiah. Now, what happens?
And his followers thought the same thing.
What happens is they rewrote it. They said, you know what? Let's make it a resurrection story. And so now Jesus resurrects. Paul comes along. He invites the Christians in, and it becomes an entire new religion. Now, Messiah means someone who is going to have a second coming and do all of this stuff. But as far as the Jews were concerned, still no Jerusalem. And so even though the Christians were claiming Messiah, they're like, that's cool. Our land, the entire point of us getting a king and getting a Messiah to get Jerusalem back, still not ours.
Do you see how unreasonable that is? Because look, if you read the narrative of the Gospels, the narrative was they themselves thought we had the wrong guy. He's not the Messiah because he died. Like our guy who we were supposed to be following, who's winning, he just died. He was not supposed to die. Jesus, I mean, they were completely ignorant because Jesus said his goal was to die. And the prophecy itself said that the Messiah was to be cut off by his own people. So, and if you went into like outside of Daniel, you just go to like, it's not Micah, Zechariah. It says what? The shepherd is going to be led to the slaughter by the sheep for 30 silver coins. Like, these are things that were already prophesied about the Messiah to come. It's not just, and I don't have to just stick to Daniel, but
and the authors of the
here's the real
Gospels are
narrative. You said
capable of
that they just
constructing something
continue to push this lie. So what you're saying is, in order to push this lie, they were willing to be filleted and boiled alive.
Yes, in order to be wrong, people die for being wrong all the time. We saw that on 9/11.
No, they don't die for lies. Knowable lies.
There's still people who think
not
Heaven's
that
Gate
they
was
were
right.
tricked, but
There's
they
people that are
nobly
wringing their hands
lied about
because
the
they
whole
didn't-
thing, fabricated it.
So can
There's people who are
say-
still upset that they
go
didn't go
ahead,
into the
I'm sorry.
spaceship with the other Heaven's Gate cultists, and who still believe and still teach the teachings of the Heaven's Gate cultists that all killed themselves. There are people who believe all sorts of things.
because
They're
they
suicidal
believe
and
something.
insane.
Yeah, they believed something. Yeah, they thought that they were going to receive some kind of resurrection or something. I don't know, by
So
drinking the Kool-Aid poison. The
this
poison
is a
Kool-Aid.
silly,
Yeah, I know
a
about that
silly
story.
Christian myth that people don't die for lies. People die for lies all the time. They know it's a lie.
No.
And they will die for it.
Okay. Really quick. Lies that they know of,
Yep.
like that they are firsthand accounts. They know it's a
Yep.
lie, and they could save themselves by denying it.
Yep.
Nice.
You want an
Okay,
obvious example?
you have a
Like a
case?
super easy, obvious example?
Yeah. Can I have a case where somebody died
There
for
are
what they
no
knew to be a
Jews
lie?
in the basement buying.
Okay, man.
Yeah, there's this silly, stupid Christian idea that
Yeah, but
people don't die for lies.
okay,
Yeah, they
but
do.
Here's
Yeah,
okay.
they do.
So you're gonna bring up somebody trying to preserve life. They valued something above their life, meaning the
yes.
preservation of somebody else's
Yes.
life. So what was the thing
Like-
that they were
like
trying to
an
preserve by
ideology?
continuing the lie up to the point of being filleted and boiled alive?
Ideology.
Ideology. What you think that's really that important to people?
Yes.
Usually religious ideology, but not always religious.
It seems pretty important to you.
Oh, wrecked.
Okay, really quick. Did the guy who led the poison Kool-Aid ceremony, did he drink the Kool-Aid?
Jim Jones?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Did he? Let's Google. I'm Googling this.
I'm pretty sure they killed anyone who didn't take.
Honestly, it's probably a bad idea to use Jim Jones because he could have just been suicidal.
But my
But
other point
that
was
would be the same
9/11.
claim
Can I
of
answer
all the
your
other
question?
disciples, is that they're
Hang
all
on.
just
Your question
suicidal.
was, did he drink the Kool-Aid? Not with regard to him being suicidal.
Jim Jones
Yeah,
biography.
what was his name? Was it actually Jim Jones?
Yeah, it looks James Warren Jones. Cause of death.
James Warren Jones.
Suicide. So no, not the Kool-Aid. He died by a gunshot. Suicide.
Wait, did he drink the juice? It says he died at 47, so I assume he drank it.
As the leader, he had to make sure everybody else drank it, though.
Death. DEF.
Anyway, it's not necessary for people to believe that they're lying.
No. They all knew it was. I think they all knew it was poison.
It's not. Look, let's just get back to the original example, right? When people develop religious ideology, they generally form a belief in it, even though it's a gradual process of each person sort of adding to the set of beliefs. All the people believe that all the people before them have done so honestly and that the beliefs are true. The lie is not something that each individual person is aware of. It's a constructive fiction that they all come to believe in, right?
Okay.
So if you look at every gospel is different from the previous gospel. The gospels change and innovate, clearly showing that each religious community that wrote each gospel held different beliefs about Jesus and had different stories about him. And so these natural sort of telephone games that people play with beliefs and stories, where they collect all the stories, and whoever writes it down in the gospel assumes that all the stories that they've heard are true, right? Now, each of the gospel writers can believe that their version of it is true because they all heard a different version of the telephone game. It doesn't require them to think that they're lying, right?
Okay, I think there's a lot of assumptions baked into there. You would have to assume that they just all believe in different Jesuses. Like, of course,
they
you're
all
gonna have
heard
some
different
people.
Things.
Yeah, maybe they heard different things.
It's just
But we're
trivially
talking about
true.
the text. We're talking about the text that would have been shared between all of them.
They wrote different stories because they heard different things and reported those in their gospels, right? So we don't have to assume that the author of the gospel made stuff up. We can just conclude that they heard different stories from different people. Did any given person know that they were making it up? We don't know. But when people play telephone, when they're 5 years old, sitting around in a circle, they do the exact same thing by just making mistakes.
But I was going to bring up the example Bartholomew, who was filleted alive. He's either boiled or filleted alive. I believe it was filleted. On what basis? You brought up ideology. Explain that to me, because you were saying that they were dying for a belief that they actually held to. What was that belief?
That Christ was some kind of salvific Messiah.
Well, sure that he was, but what you see in the Gospels is they went into hiding because he died. So what do you think made them come out?
I don't quite understand the question.
Well, okay, so in the Gospel narrative, the apostles saw their guy die, and they went into hiding in fear of the Jews. After that, what made them think to come out?
Well, there's a number of things that happened. One of the things that happened was because of the destruction of Jerusalem due to the riots.
Dude, that's 40 years after. I'm sorry.
The major
they had
branch,
one reason to create churches and to go out.
The major branch of Christianity that was dominated by James and the other Judaists, if you will, that were more interested in practicing a Judaic-centric version of Christianity, was essentially exterminated by the destruction of Jerusalem, along with the Sadducee version of Judaism, right? So you had two versions of Judaism and Christianity that were dominant in Jerusalem that were wiped out. Afterwards,
I understand partially where you're going with this, except it's not conducive to the argument. I'm asking you, what exactly made them want to come out?
The thing that led to the flourishing of Christianity, was the extermination of its competitors.
Okay, man. Okay. Yeah, they went out and killed their opponents like Muslims. No, I'm sorry. That's
No.
not
They
an
didn't do
argument.
it. The Romans did it. The point is, when the Romans wiped out
Yeah, they killed
Jewish
the Jews.
Christianity, the Jewish
Yeah,
Christianity was
it's almost like
essentially
Jesus
extinguished,
predicted it. Yeah,
and
Jesus
Paul's
predicted it
version
40 years
was the
prior.
survivor and was the one that predominated.
Look,
That's
man,
what caused it to
I asked you
explode in
one simple
popularity.
question, and you're not even answering it. And I'm not. It's not a gotcha. It's not like, oh, ha, ha, you don't know, you're stupid. I can tell you. You can just ask me.
Actually, they did kill off a lot of people. They killed off the Kahuna who were in Hawaii before they moved in, and then they took over and wiped them out.
Yeah. And just so you know, Jesus said you could escape the destruction by running to the mountains. So it was
Why
a
should people living there have
destruction.
to run? That's ridiculous. They
Yeah,
came in and
because
slaughtered people.
Josephus noted it out that the people that survived were the Christians who heard Jesus and listened to him, and they actually fled to the mountains. They didn't try to save the temple. They didn't
That's
try to
just an
fight.
excuse for
And the people that
unethical
died
behavior.
were the Jews. Josephus noted this out. Yeah, and just so you know, the answer is they came out of hiding because they saw the resurrected Messiah, not because they heard he resurrected. They saw him. That's why they came out.
The belief that a person who's a major religious leader appears to people after their death is widespread and common in almost all religious groups. People
Yeah,
have this
enough. Yeah,
apparition.
and they
This
all
is
went out
true.
and got filleted for it. They couldn't
The
participate in
point
markets
is
for
not
it.
that they.
Yeah.
The point is not that they don't believe it. The point is that people do. After a religious leader dies, people have intense visions of that religious leader. It's been reproduced in
It wasn't just a
many
vision.
other religious leaders' deaths.
It wasn't a private revelation. They shared this revelation together.
People
Now,
routinely confuse these experiences with real experiences. They think that it really happened.
okay. So
It's been
you
reproduced
think
in other religions.
Jesus' disciples was a group of 12 schizophrenics, is what you're telling me.
I'm saying that people have the delusion of seeing dead loved ones, and especially of major religious leaders.
Sure.
It's a common occurrence. It's well documented. There's multiple books about it.
This is another
Sure,
common
but
Christian
get
myth.
the nature of your argument.
This is another common Christian myth that you can't have shared delusions. There literally are shared delusions. Folia do is an actual case.
I'm sorry.
More
I've got to
commonly,
head out.
there's like communal reinforcement. Communal reinforcement is most likely what happened with the apostles and the 500. So yeah, those are extremely common things. It is not at all surprising that the apostles would have shared delusions of Jesus' resurrection.
And the
Yeah, that makes sense.
example that I really wanted to press him on was, why did 9/11 happen? Because if no one, first of all, it doesn't have to be a lie. It is dying for being wrong. They were wrong about something. And on 9/11, they all died for something they thought was right. In fact, worse than that, they thought they were probably being moral. And that is the harm of religion. One of
You
them.
know, I mentioned Kahuna, which is a religion that was common in Hawaii before the Christians moved in there, and they just kind of took over. This whole idea that they should have run away is an excuse. Why should they leave their homeland when invaders come? You know, it's the invaders are definitely the bad guys in that case. But the Maori had the Kahuna religion was very sexist too. So it's not that Christianity was any better. It's just different kind of sexism is all.
Religion, isn't it fun?
People in Judaism at Masada were rebels against Rome and were massacred because they held their ground and they died as martyrs. They actually mostly killed themselves before the Romans got there.
Well, it looks like we've come to the end of the show here. I'm just wondering, did anybody have any final thoughts they wanted to share about the episodes today? I did think that our conversation with the alien was particularly interesting. Really enjoyed that one. I think we had a number of good talks today. But what are people's thoughts about what we encountered today?
I guess I'll start just saying that thank you so much, all of our guests, for joining us. I don't think that we're gonna believe necessarily in a God for a necessary being. I don't know why quantum field theory and fluctuations seems to get them so upset, but it does. And I enjoyed, like you said, whether telekinesis or mind reading is true. There's a reason that James Randi's name gets brought up so often. It's because he really put them to the test. And there's a lot of good videos out there of him testing, people who do cold and unfortunately hot readings out there. And then, people die for a lie all the time, unfortunately. People die for being wrong, and even worse, sometimes even people know when they are wrong and are just malicious people. And so, yeah, but it was a good episode. I do want to thank Taco Randolph for hosting it, and sending love to T Jump and X and everyone out there.
Thank you, Amy. IX, what thoughts do you have for today?
Reciprocating the love to everybody on our panel and to our wonderful guests and audience for engaging with us. A couple of the things that we brought up today, we talked a little bit about scientific methodology and how you can learn more about why our best theories are developed with the methodology that they are. If you want to understand that stuff better, I highly recommend looking into a physicist who does like foundations of science called Tim Maudlin. If you want to see like a scientist who goes through all the other physicists' theories and kind of rates them based on like what their empiric strength is, how like theoretically plausible they are, and so on, doesn't just give you one personal favorite theory. Look at a physicist named Tim Maudlin. And if you want to know more about religious history and the best religious scholarship that is probing all the details of biblical and Canaanite and Hellenistic and Assyriology stuff, look into Myth Vision. And I would encourage everyone to especially watch a recent episode of Myth Vision, which shows that Moses, there's no documented evidence of any mention of Moses or the Tanakh prior to the 4th century BC. And there's evidence of Elephantine, which is a Jewish colony, writing extensively to and from Jerusalem about their colony without any mention of any of the figures or stories of the Tanakh. So Judaism is probably a more recently developed set of scriptures that developed much later than you probably think. And this is just the beginning of the rabbit hole of getting into the history of Canaanite religion, of which Judaism an offshoot. And it'll deepen your appreciation and understanding for what value the stories do have, and it could make you a more appreciative Jewish or Christian student of the Bible if you start looking into this stuff. But it's not going to be what you expect if you believe in the systematic theology and the sort of fictional history of which the Bible is filled with.
Thank you, X. T-Jump, did you have any final thoughts for today? Did you want to talk about Church of the Best Possible World?
Let's see. I have a debate coming up on the 10th at a local church. And then I'm going to Australia and doing a debate or a lecture at the ISCAST conference on like November 29th, I think.
This is great. Will these debates be on your YouTube channel?
Hopefully. I think they're both recorded, but I'm unsure.
Oh, that's great. And you have some more coming up too?
Just those two.
Well, congratulations in advance.
Thanks.
I hope they go well for you. And for people who want more information about T-Jump's Church of the Best Possible World, you can go to theisthelpline.com, click on About Us, scroll down to T-Jump's profile information, and all the links that you'll need are there. Taco, did you have any final thoughts?
I just feel like they don't listen to anything we say, man. I was talking to both those guys earlier, and I answered their question, and then they started asking me questions about like stuff that I had just explained without actually asked. They're like, well, what's this? Well, I just explained that. And they don't listen. This is what they do.
I really appreciate everybody tuning in today. Thank you very much. I know we all appreciate it. we look forward to our last show is going to be the first Sunday of December for this year, and then we'll be doing some more next year. Hopefully, Talk and I are going to talk about that. Very likely, we will continue with this. I'm also probably going to be in a debate sometime late November or in December. There's an anti-abortion person on Twitter who's challenged me. She's got quite a following and is interested in doing debate. I'm trying to reach out to an OBGYN I know so that she can team up with me to cover the medical aspects, since that's not my strong point in this. And we'll hopefully be doing this on Modern Day Debate, which brings in quite a large audience as well. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And a special thanks goes to our sponsors, the Canadian Atheists, and of course, the Politics Discord. The link gets censored by the Discord bots for some reason. So I'll just tell you to circumvent that. It's at www.discord.gg/politics to get to the Politics Discord. I highly recommend it. It's a busy, active community, and I'm often on various channels related to atheism or whatnot that while I'm driving. So that's usually mostly when I have time for it. Anyway, thank you, everybody. And we hope everyone had a good Halloween, and we'll talk to you later. For more information about Theist Helpline and the schedule for the upcoming shows, please take a look at www.theisthelpline.com.
Quick correction,
everybody. Sorry?
The Book of Daniel was somewhere between 167 and 164. Sorry, I misremembered the date. It's been a while since I talked about it.
Corrections are always welcome. Glad you brought it up. Thank you. Okay, take care, everybody.
Night.
Thank you, everyone.